Hello, horror lover. Are you ready for a long night of nightmares? Before we begin, I want to ask you to subscribe to the channel, and especially leave a comment telling me which city you're watching from. I'd love to know. Click the like button, all of this because the lawnmower growled beneath my hands, vibrating up through my arms as I pushed it across the sun-baked grass. Sweat trickled down my back, soaking my already damp t-shirt. It was barely 10 in the morning, and the heat was already oppressive. I'd been putting off this chore for days, but Sarah had finally put her foot down. "For God's sake, Jack," she'd said over breakfast. "The neighbors are starting to talk. Just mow the damn lawn." So here I was, trudging back and forth across our backyard, leaving neat rows of freshly cut grass in my wake. As I neared the far corner of the property, where the old well stood like a crumbling tombstone, I heard something. At first I thought it was just the wind or maybe the rhythmic chunking of the mower blades. But as I got closer to the well, the sound became clearer. Whispers. I released the mower's handle, and the engine sputtered to a stop. The sudden silence was deafening, broken only by the chirping of birds and something else. I took a step closer to the well, my heart beginning to race. "Hello?" I called out, feeling ridiculous. The well had been dry for years, its depths nothing but dust and spider webs. But the whispers persisted, like the murmur of a faraway crowd. I leaned in closer, my ear nearly touching the rough stone of the well's rim. And then I heard it, clear as day. "Help us." I jerked back so fast I nearly fell over. My pulse pounded in my ears as I stared at the innocuous circle of stone. It had to be a trick of the wind, or maybe the heat was getting to me. I shook my head, trying to clear it, and grabbed the mower's handle. "Jack?" Sarah's voice called from the back porch. "You okay out there?" I turned to see her standing there, a glass of lemonade in her hand, concern etched on her face. "Yeah," I called back, my voice sounding strained even to my own ears. "Yeah, I'm fine. Just taking a breather." She didn't look convinced, but she nodded and went back inside. I stood there for a moment longer, staring at the well. The whispers had stopped, or at least I couldn't hear them anymore over the pounding of my own heart. I finished mowing the lawn in record time, giving the well a wide berth. By the time I trudged back into the house, my shirt was soaked through with sweat, and my hands were still trembling slightly. Sarah was in the kitchen, chopping vegetables for dinner. She looked up as I entered, her brow furrowing. "Jack, you look like you've seen a ghost. Are you sure you're okay?" I grabbed a glass from the cupboard and filled it with water from the tap, gulping it down before answering. "I'm fine, really. It's just hot out there." "Maybe you should lie down for a bit," she suggested, putting down her knife. "You look pale." I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. As I headed upstairs to our bedroom, I could feel Sarah's worried gaze following me. I lay down on top of the covers, staring at the ceiling fan as it lazily spun overhead. Every time I closed my eyes, I could hear those whispers again. "Help us. Help us. Help us." It echoed in my mind like a broken record. I must have dozed off because the next thing I knew, Sarah was gently shaking me awake. The room was bathed in the golden light of late afternoon. "Honey, dinner's ready," she said softly. "Are you feeling any better?" I sat up, rubbing my eyes. "Yeah, I think so. Just needed a nap, I guess." She sat down on the edge of the bed, her hand cool against my forehead. "No fever," she murmured. "But you were talking in your sleep. Something about voices?" A chill ran down my spine despite the warmth of the room. "Was I? I don't remember dreaming anything." Sarah's frown deepened. "Jack, what happened out there today? And don't tell me it was just the heat. I know you better than that." I sighed, running a hand through my hair. How could I explain what I'd heard without sounding completely insane? I thought I heard something. Coming from the old well. "The well?" Sarah repeated, her eyebrows rising. "But it's been dry for years. What kind of something?" "Voices," I admitted, the word barely above a whisper. Whispering. Asking for help. Sarah was quiet for a long moment, her blue eyes searching my face. Finally, she spoke, her voice gentle but firm. "Jack, honey, I think maybe you've been working too hard lately. The heat, the stress, it can play tricks on your mind." "Yeah," I said, latching onto the lifeline she was offering. "Yeah, you're probably right. I've been pulling a lot of late nights at the office." She smiled, patting my hand. "Why don't you take tomorrow off? We can have a lazy day, maybe go for a picnic in the park, get you away from the house for a bit." I nodded, forcing a smile. "That sounds great, hon. Thanks." Sarah leaned in and kissed my cheek before standing up. "Come on down when you're ready. Dinner's getting cold." As soon as she left the room, my smile faded. I walked to the window, looking out at our backyard. The well stood there, innocuous in the fading light, but even from here I could swear I saw something moving in its shadows. Dinner was a quiet affair. I pushed my food around my plate, my appetite gone. Sarah tried to keep up a conversation, chattering about her day at work and plans for the weekend, but my responses were monosyllabic at best. "All right," she said finally, putting down her fork. "Enough is enough. What's really going on, Jack? And don't tell me it's nothing. I haven't seen you this distracted since your father died." I winced at the mention of Dad. It had been 5 years, but the pain was still fresh. "I'm sorry, Sarah. I just can't shake this feeling, those whispers." "Jack," she interrupted, her voice taking on an edge of frustration. "There were no whispers. It's an old, dry well. Maybe you heard some kids playing in the next yard over, or maybe it was just the wind. But there is nothing in that well. You don't know that," I snapped, immediately regretting my tone when I saw the hurt flash across her face. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to. Look, I know how it sounds. I do. But I know what I heard." Sarah reached across the table, taking my hand in hers. "I'm worried about you, Jack. Maybe you should talk to someone. Dr. Hendricks has an opening next week. I could call and—" "I don't need a shrink," I interrupted, pulling my hand away. "I'm not crazy, Sarah." "I never said you were," she replied softly. "But something's clearly bothering you. If you won't talk to me about it, maybe talking to a professional would help." I stood up abruptly, my chair scraping loudly against the floor. "I'm going to bed. Early day tomorrow." "Jack," Sarah called after me as I headed for the stairs. "Jack, please, let's talk about this." But I was already halfway up the stairs, my mind racing. I knew what I'd heard. I wasn't crazy, and I was going to prove it. That night I tossed and turned, unable to find a comfortable position. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw faces in the darkness. Pale, gaunt faces with hollow eyes, mouths open in silent screams. Hands reached out from the shadows, grasping at me with bony fingers. I jolted awake, gasping for breath. The digital clock on the nightstand read 3:17 a.m. Sarah slept peacefully beside me, her breathing slow and even. For a moment, I envied her ability to find rest, and as quietly as I could, I slipped out of bed and padded to the window. The moon hung low in the sky, casting long shadows across the yard. And there, at the far end, stood the well. In the silvery moonlight, it looked almost beautiful, like something out of a fairy tale. But fairy tales, I remembered, were often dark and dangerous things. As I watched, a mist began to form around the well. It swirled and eddied, taking on shapes that were almost human. And then, carried on the night breeze, I heard it again. "Help us, Jack. Please. Help us." My name. They had said my name. I pressed my forehead against the cool glass of the window, my breath fogging the pain. "What do you want?" I whispered, not sure if I was hoping for an answer or dreading one. But the whispers had faded, leaving only the quiet of the night and the pounding of my own heart. I stood there for a long time, watching the well, waiting for something, anything to happen. But the mist dissipated, and the yard returned to its normal, mundane appearance. As the first light of dawn began to creep over the horizon, I made a decision. Today, I would find out what was in that well. Today, I would uncover the truth behind the whispers. The morning sun beat down mercilessly as I stood at the edge of the well, flashlight in hand. My palms were sweaty and my heart raced. I'd waited until Sarah left for work, unable to face her concerned glances and probing questions. Now alone in the oppressive heat, I felt a mixture of dread and anticipation. "This is crazy," I muttered to myself, running a hand through my hair. "There's nothing down there. Nothing." But even as I said it, I knew I was lying to myself. The whispers from the night before still echoed in my mind, calling my name, begging for help. I took a deep breath, switched on the flashlight, and leaned over the well's edge. At first, all I saw was darkness. The beam of light seemed to be swallowed by the inky blackness below. But as I adjusted the angle, something caught my eye. A flash of white, gone almost as soon as it appeared. "Hello?" I called down, my voice echoing in the depths. "Is anyone there?" For a moment there was only silence. Then, so faintly I almost missed it, came a response. "Jack, help us." My hands shook as I gripped the flashlight tighter, scanning the well's interior. And then I saw them. Faces. Pale, gaunt faces emerging from the shadows, their eyes wide and pleading. I recoiled, nearly dropping the flashlight, but forced myself to look again. There were dozens of them, maybe more, crowding against each other in the narrow confines of the well. Men, women, even children, all with the same desperate expression. But one face in particular stood out, and as I focused on it, I felt the world tilt beneath my feet. "Tommy?" I whispered, disbelief coloring my voice. The face of my childhood best friend Tommy Parker stared back at me. But it couldn't be Tommy. Tommy had died 20 years ago, drowned in the lake just outside of town. We were only 12 then, our whole lives ahead of us. Until that summer day when everything changed. "Jack?" Tommy's voice drifted up from the well, a horrifying mixture of the child I remembered and something older. "Jack, you gotta help us. Please, man. We're stuck down here." I stumbled back, my legs giving out beneath me. I fell hard onto the dry grass, the impact knocking the wind out of me. The flashlight rolled away, its beam pointing uselessly at the sky. "This isn't real," I gasped, cold sweat breaking out all over my body. "You're not real. You can't be." But Tommy's voice continued, joined by others, a cacophony of pleas rising from the well. "Jack, please. Help us. Don't leave us here." I pressed my hands against my ears, trying to block out the voices, but they seemed to be inside my head now, impossible to escape. "Jack?" This voice was different, closer, real. I looked up to see Sarah standing over me, her face a mask of concern and confusion. "Jack, what are you doing out here? I thought you were taking the day off." I blinked, suddenly aware of how I must look, sprawled on the ground, covered in sweat and grass stains, babbling to myself. "Sarah," I croaked, my throat dry. "Sarah, I saw them. In the well. Tommy was there, and others. So many others." Sarah knelt beside me, her cool hand on my forehead. "You're burning up, Jack. Come on, let's get you inside." She helped me to my feet, but I resisted when she tried to lead me towards the house. "No, you don't understand. They're down there. They need help." Sarah's eyes widened, and I saw something flicker across her face. Fear. Not of the well or what might be in it, but of me. "There's nothing in the well, Jack," she said slowly, as if speaking to a child. "It's been dry for years. You're not well. You need to rest." I wanted to argue, to make her understand, but the words wouldn't come. I let her guide me into the house, my legs shaky and uncooperative. The rest of the day passed in a haze. Sarah called in sick to work, staying home to keep an eye on me. She brought me water and soup, checked my temperature, and spoke in hushed tones on the phone, probably to Dr. Hendricks, I thought bitterly. As evening fell, Sarah came into our bedroom where I'd been lying, staring at the ceiling. "I've made an appointment with Dr. Hendricks for tomorrow morning," she said softly, sitting on the edge of the bed. I think you need to talk to someone, Jack. About your dad, about work stress, about everything." I turned to look at her, seeing the worry etched in every line of her face. "You think I'm crazy?" I said flatly. Sarah sighed, reaching for my hand. "I think you're going through something, and you need help. That's all." I pulled my hand away, rolling to face the wall. "I know what I saw, Sarah." She was quiet for a long moment before standing up. "Try to get some sleep, okay? I'll be right downstairs if you need anything." As soon as I heard her footsteps fade and the TV click on downstairs, I was out of bed. I moved quietly, pulling on jeans and a sweatshirt, shoving my feet into old sneakers. The flashlight was still out by the well where I'd dropped it earlier. I'd have to risk the darkness. I crept down the stairs, wincing at every creak of the old wood. Sarah was in the living room, the blue glow of the TV flickering across her face. She didn't turn as I slipped past and out the back door. The night air was cool against my skin, a stark contrast to the oppressive heat of the day. The moon hung low and full in the sky, casting long shadows across the yard. And there, at the far end, stood the well. I approached slowly, my heart pounding in my chest. This was madness, I knew. I should be in bed, resting, preparing to talk to Dr. Hendricks in the morning. But I couldn't shake the memory of those faces, of Tommy's voice calling out to me. As I neared the well, the whispers started again, faint at first, but growing stronger with each step. "Jack, you came back. Help us, Jack. Please don't leave us here." I gripped the edge of the well, peering down into the darkness. "I'm here," I called softly, not wanting to alert Sarah. "I'm here. Tell me how to help you." For a moment, there was silence. Then Tommy's voice drifted up, clearer than before. "You have to come down, Jack. It's the only way." I recoiled, shaking my head. No, I can't do that. There has to be another way." "There isn't," Tommy insisted. "Please, Jack. We've been waiting so long. You're our only hope." I stood there frozen, torn between the rational part of my mind screaming at me to run back to the house and the part that couldn't abandon my friend, dead or not, again. "Okay," I heard myself say, the word barely more than a whisper. "Okay, I'll come down. But how?" As if in answer, a rope appeared, dangling from the edge of the well. I hadn't noticed it before, but now it seemed so obvious, so inviting. With shaking hands, I grasped the rope. It felt solid, real. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what I was about to do. "I'm coming," I called down. "Hold on." I swung my legs over the edge of the well, the rope rough against my palms. For a moment I hesitated, looking back at the house where Sarah slept, unaware of what I was about to do. "I'm sorry," I whispered, though whether to Sarah or myself I wasn't sure. Then, with a final deep breath, I began my descent into darkness, leaving the world I knew behind. As I climbed down, the whispers grew louder, more insistent. The faces I'd seen earlier began to materialize in the gloom, their eyes fixed on me with a hunger that sent chills down my spine. But it was too late to turn back now. I continued my descent, the rope seeming to stretch endlessly into the abyss. The world above grew distant, a pinprick of moonlight far above. And still I climbed down into the unknown, driven by a mixture of fear, curiosity, and a desperate need to understand. What awaited me at the bottom of this well? The truth I sought, or something far more terrifying? As the darkness closed in around me, I realized I was about to find out. The rope felt rough against my palms as I continued my descent into the well. The whispers had grown louder, more insistent, a cacophony of pleading voices that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. I tried to focus on my breathing, on the simple act of moving hand over hand down the rope, but my mind raced with questions and doubts. What was I doing? This was madness. I should turn back, climb up, forget this whole thing. But even as these thoughts flitted through my mind, I knew I couldn't stop now. I had to know the truth. Suddenly, the rope went slack in my hands. I yelped, scrabbling for purchase against the slick stone walls of the well. My feet kicked uselessly in the air as I dangled, my heart pounding in my chest. "Hello?" I called out, my voice echoing in the darkness. "Tommy? Anyone?" The whispers had stopped. An eerie silence settled over me, broken only by the sound of my own ragged breathing. Then, just as I was about to attempt climbing back up, I felt it. A touch. Cold as ice, fingers wrapping around my ankle. I looked down, straining to see in the darkness. A pale face loomed below me, its features twisted into a grotesque grin. It wasn't Tommy. It wasn't anyone I recognized. But its eyes... God, its eyes were alive with a hunger that sent chills down my spine. "No," I whispered, trying to shake off its grip. "Let go." But more hands appeared, grasping at my legs, my clothes. I could feel the chill of their touch even through my jeans. They were pulling me down, their grips inhumanly strong. I screamed then, all pretense of bravery gone. "Help. Sarah. Anybody. Help me." My fingers clawed at the edge of the well as I was yanked forward. I could feel my nails breaking, blood welling up as I desperately tried to find purchase on the smooth stone. But it was no use. The hands were too strong. Too many. With a final, wrenching pull, I was torn away from the well's edge. I fell, tumbling head over heels into the abyss. The faces of the dead swirled around me, their mouths open in silent screams that matched my own. I don't know how long I fell. It could have been seconds or hours. Time seemed to lose all meaning in that endless darkness. But suddenly, abruptly, I landed. The impact knocked the wind out of me. I lay there gasping, my eyes squeezed shut. I was afraid to open them, afraid of what I might see. But gradually, I became aware of a soft, pulsing light filtering through my eyelids. Slowly, cautiously, I opened my eyes. I found myself in a vast, cavernous space. The ceiling, if there was one, was lost in shadows high above. But what caught my attention, what made my breath catch in my throat, was the light. Everything was bathed in an eerie, pulsating blue glow. It seemed to emanate from the very walls, from the ground beneath me. It was unlike anything I'd ever seen before, beautiful and terrifying all at once. As my eyes adjusted, I began to make out shapes in the gloom. Figures, dozens of them, perhaps hundreds, standing silently around the edges of the cavern. They were watching me, their eyes reflecting the blue light like cat's eyes in the dark. I scrambled to my feet, my heart racing. "Who are you?" I called out, my voice shaking. "What is this place?" The figures began to move forward, emerging from the shadows. I recognized some of them from the well, the faces I'd seen peering up at me. But there were so many more. Men, women, children, all with the same pale, gaunt appearance. All dead, I realized with a jolt of horror. I was surrounded by the dead. "Welcome, Jack," a chorus of voices whispered, the sound seeming to come from everywhere at once. "Welcome to our world." I spun around, trying to keep them all in sight. "This isn't possible," I muttered. "This can't be real." "Oh, but it is," a familiar voice said from behind me. I turned slowly, dreading what I might see. And there, emerging from the crowd of the dead, was a face I knew all too well, a face I'd seen every day in the mirror, aged and worn but unmistakable. "Dad," I whispered, my voice cracking. My father stood before me, looking exactly as he had the day he died 5 years ago. His eyes, once so full of life and laughter, now held only sorrow. "Hello, son," he said, his voice echoing strangely in the cavernous space. "I wish we were meeting again under better circumstances." I took a step back, shaking my head. No, this isn't real. You're dead. You're all dead." Dad nodded, a sad smile on his face. Yes, we are. But death, it seems, is not quite the end we thought it was. What is this place? I asked, looking around at the sea of dead faces surrounding us. Why am I here? This is, well, we're not quite sure what to call it, Dad said, gesturing around. A way station, perhaps. A place between life and death. And you're here because we called you, Jack. We need your help. I laughed, a harsh, hysterical sound. My help? How could I possibly help you? You're dead. We're trapped, another voice said. I turned to see Tommy step forward, looking just as he had the day he drowned, forever 12 years old. We can't move on, Jack. We're stuck here, and we need someone from the world of the living to help us. I shook my head, backing away. This is insane. I'm dreaming. I have to be dreaming. I'm afraid not, son, Dad said, reaching out to me. His hand passed right through my arm, leaving a chill in its wake. This is very real, and very dangerous. Dangerous? I repeated, my voice rising. How can it be dangerous? You're dead. Death isn't the end of danger, Jack, Tommy said, his young face serious. There are things here, things that want to keep us trapped, things that feed on our pain, our regret, our unfinished business. As if on cue, a low rumble echoed through the cavern. The blue light flickered, and for a moment I saw something move in the shadows, something large, and decidedly not human. What was that? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. That, Dad said grimly, is why we need your help. We don't have much time, Jack. The barrier between our worlds is thinning. If we don't act soon, the things that keep us here might find a way into your world. I looked around at the sea of desperate faces, at my father's sorrowful eyes, at Tommy's pleading expression. This was madness, complete and utter madness. And yet, what do you need me to do? I heard myself ask. A collective sigh of relief seemed to pass through the crowd of the dead. Dad stepped forward, his expression a mixture of pride and regret. It won't be easy, son, he said, and it will be dangerous. But if you're willing, we can show you how to close the rift between our worlds, how to set us free. I swallowed hard, my mind reeling. This morning, my biggest concern had been mowing the lawn. Now, I was standing in a realm of the dead, being asked to save both the living and the deceased. Okay, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. Show me. As Dad began to explain, the blue light pulsed around us, casting long shadows across the cavern. And in those shadows I could swear I saw something moving, watching, waiting. Whatever cosmic balance I had stumbled into, I realized I was now irrevocably part of it. The descent into the well had been just the beginning. The eerie blue light pulsed around us as my father led me through the cavernous space. The other spirits kept their distance, but I could feel their eyes on me, hungry and desperate. My mind was reeling, trying to process everything I'd seen and heard. Dad, I said, my voice echoing strangely in the vast chamber. I need you to explain everything. What is this place? How are you here? How am I here? My father sighed, a sound that seemed to carry the weight of years, or perhaps decades, of sorrow. He gestured for me to sit on what looked like a smooth, glowing rock formation. As I did, he began to pace, his form flickering slightly with each step. This place, Jack, he began, his voice low and somber. It's not heaven or hell. It's something in between. A realm that exists between life and death. Some might call it purgatory, but it's more complicated than that. I leaned forward, hanging on every word. So, you're not really dead? A sad smile crossed my father's face. No, son, we are very much dead. But our spirits, our essence, whatever you want to call it, we're trapped here, unable to move on, unable to return to the world of the living. But why? I asked, feeling a lump form in my throat. Why are you trapped? Dad ran a hand through his spectral hair, a gesture so familiar it made my heart ache. It's different for each of us. Unfinished business, regrets, strong emotional ties to the living world. But lately, something's changed. He paused, looking around at the other spirits that hovered nearby, listening intently. The barrier between our world and yours has been growing thinner. We think it's because of the drought." "The drought?" I repeated, confused. "What does that have to do with anything?" "Water, Jack," my father explained. "Water has always been a conduit between worlds in folklore and mythology. The well in your backyard? It used to be a strong barrier, keeping our realms separate. But as it dried up, the barrier weakened," I finished, understanding dawning. "That's why I started hearing the whispers." Dad nodded. "Exactly. And you, son, you're special. You have a strong connection to this place, to us. You're a conduit." I stood up, pacing now myself. "A conduit? What does that mean?" "It means," Tommy's voice piped up as he approached, "that you can help us, Jack. You can help us return to the world of the living." I spun to face him, my childhood friend forever frozen at 12 years old. "Return? But you're dead. How can you return?" A murmur went through the crowd of spirits. I saw hope, desperation, and something darker in their eyes. My father stepped between me and them, his expression grave. "That's where it gets complicated, son," he said. "And dangerous. Some spirits here, they're not content with just moving on. They want to live again, at any cost." A chill ran down my spine. "What do you mean, at any cost?" Dad's eyes met mine, filled with sorrow and warning. "They want to possess the living, Jack, to take over their bodies and live again. And you as a conduit are their best chance at doing that." I stumbled back, horrified. No, I won't let that happen, I can't." "We don't want that either, Jack," Tommy said quickly. "That's not why we called you here. We just want your help to move on, to find peace." I looked around at the sea of faces surrounding us. Some nodded in agreement with Tommy, but others had a hunger in their eyes that made me shudder. "But why me?" I asked, turning back to my father. "Why am I a conduit?" Dad sighed again. "Because, Jack, every spirit here is connected to you in some way. Family, friends, people whose lives you touched without even realizing it. Your connection to us and to the living world makes you a bridge between realms." I sank back down onto the glowing rock, my head spinning. This is too much. I don't know if I can handle this." My father knelt in front of me, his eyes level with mine. I could almost feel the warmth of his presence, so achingly familiar. "I know it's a lot, son, and I'm so sorry to put this burden on you, but you need to understand something crucial." He paused, making sure he had my full attention. "You can't stay here long, Jack. This place, it's not meant for the living. If you don't find a way back soon, you'll be trapped here forever." The weight of his words hit me like a physical blow. Trapped? But how long do I have? "It's hard to say," Dad replied, glancing around nervously. "Time works differently here, but I'd guess no more than a day in the living world. After that..." He didn't need to finish the sentence. I understood the implication all too well. "So what do I do?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "How do I help you and get back home?" Before my father could answer, a commotion broke out among the spirits. They parted, revealing a figure I hadn't seen before. An old woman, her form more solid than the others, approached us. The other spirits seemed to recoil from her, fear evident in their eyes. "Who is that?" I whispered to my father. "That," he replied, his voice tense, "is the gatekeeper. She guards the boundary between this realm and the next, and she might be our only hope." The old woman stopped in front of us, her eyes, milky white and unseeing, fixed on me. When she spoke, her voice was like dry leaves rustling in the wind. "So," she said, "the living one has finally arrived. Do you know what you've done by coming here, boy?" I swallowed hard, trying to find my voice. I came to help, to set them free." The gatekeeper laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "Help? Free? Oh, child, you've opened a door that was never meant to be opened, and now the hungry ones are stirring. The hungry ones? I repeated, a fresh wave of fear washing over me. She nodded, her unseeing eyes somehow seeming to bore into me. The ones who aren't content with peace or oblivion. The ones who crave life no matter the cost. And you, my dear, have given them hope. I looked to my father, panic rising in my chest. What do we do? Dad stepped forward, placing himself between me and the gatekeeper. There must be a way to close the rift and let those who are ready move on. The old woman was quiet for a long moment, considering. Finally, she nodded. There is a way, but it will require a sacrifice. Are you willing to pay that price, living one? I stood up straighter, trying to summon courage I didn't feel. What kind of sacrifice? The gatekeeper smiled, revealing teeth that seemed too sharp, too numerous. That, my dear, is what you'll have to figure out. But choose quickly. The hungry ones are coming, and they won't be denied their feast. As if on cue, a distant howl echoed through the cavern. The spirits around us began to panic, their forms flickering wildly. We're out of time, my father said urgently. Jack, you need to make a decision now. I looked around at the terrified spirits, at Tommy's pleading face, at my father's worried eyes. Then I turned back to the gatekeeper, her unseeing eyes somehow seeing right through me. Tell me what I need to do, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. Whatever the cost, I'll pay it. Just tell me how to save them. The old woman's smile widened, sending chills down my spine. Very well, living one. Let the trial begin. As she spoke, the blue light around us began to pulse more rapidly. The howls grew closer, and I could feel a darkness pressing in from all sides. The gatekeeper's words still echoed in my ears as the cavern around us began to shift and change. The pulsing blue light dimmed, replaced by a soft, twilight glow that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. The howls of the hungry ones faded into the distance, leaving an eerie silence in their wake. Suddenly, the air in front of me began to shimmer and coalesce. A figure emerged from the distortion, unlike anything I had ever seen before. It was tall, easily twice my height, with a body that seemed to be made of swirling shadows and starlight. Where its face should have been, there was only a void, darker than the darkest night. When it spoke, its voice resonated in my mind rather than my ears, a sound both ancient and terrible. Jack Morrison, it intoned, my name sounding strange and foreign in its otherworldly voice. You who walk between worlds, you who would upset the balance, what is it you seek? I swallowed hard, trying to find my voice. I want to help these souls move on, and I want to return home. The entity tilted its head, an oddly human gesture for such an inhuman being. Two desires, intertwined yet separate. But the scales must balance, Jack Morrison. For every action, there must be an equal reaction. What do you mean? I asked, a sense of dread growing in the pit of my stomach. The entity waved its hand, and suddenly we were surrounded by swirling images. I saw my house, Sarah sleeping fitfully in our bed, the well in the backyard. Then the images shifted, showing the cavern filled with lost souls. You wish to return to your world, the entity said. This can be granted, but the doorway you opened must be closed, the balance restored. I nodded, hope rising in my chest. Yes, that's exactly what I want. How do we do it? The entity's form seemed to darken, the starlight within it dimming. The price is high, Jack Morrison. To return to your world, to close the rift, you must leave something behind. Or rather, someone. My blood ran cold as the meaning of its words sank in. You mean, I have to choose someone to take my place? Yes, the entity confirmed. One soul must remain to maintain the balance. Choose wisely, for their fate will be to remain in this limbo for eternity. I staggered back, shaking my head. No, I can't do that. I won't condemn someone to stay here forever. Then you will remain, the entity said, its voice devoid of emotion. The choice is yours, Jack Morrison. You have one cycle of your world's sun to decide. When the time is up, you will make your choice, or you will become a permanent resident of this realm. With that, the entity vanished, leaving me alone in the Twilight Realm. I sank to my knees, my mind reeling from the impossible choice before me. Jack? My father's voice came from behind me. I turned to see him and Tommy approaching cautiously. What happened? What did it say? I explained the entity's bargain, my voice shaking. Dad's face fell, while Tommy's eyes widened in a mixture of hope and fear. Oh, Jack, Dad said, placing a hand on my shoulder. I couldn't feel it, but the gesture was comforting nonetheless. I'm so sorry. This is an impossible choice. But you have to choose someone, right? Tommy interjected, his voice eager. I mean, you can't stay here, Jack. You have your whole life ahead of you. I looked at my childhood friend, shocked by his words. Tommy, how can you say that? I can't just condemn someone to stay here forever. Tommy's face fell, and he looked away. I'm sorry, Jack, I want you to be okay. Dad stepped between us, his expression grave. Son, you have a difficult decision ahead of you. But remember, everyone here is already dead. Our fates were sealed long ago. Yours still hangs in the balance. I stood up, running my hands through my hair in frustration. That doesn't make it right, Dad. How am I supposed to choose who stays trapped here? How could I live with myself after making a choice like that? You'll find a way, son, Dad said softly. You've always been stronger than you give yourself credit for. As we spoke, I noticed other spirits beginning to approach. Some I recognized, old neighbors, distant relatives, faces from my past that I had almost forgotten. Others were strangers to me, but their eyes held the same desperate hope as they looked at me. An elderly woman stepped forward, her form flickering like an old film. Jack Morrison? Do you remember me? I'm Mrs. Landry from down the street. You used to mow my lawn when you were a boy. I nodded, the memory coming back to me. Of course, Mrs. Landry. I remember your lemonade. You always said it was your secret recipe. She smiled, the expression not quite reaching her eyes. That's right, dear. Listen, Jack, I know you have a difficult choice to make, but I want you to know I've lived a long life. If you need someone to stay behind. No, I cut her off, my voice harsher than I intended. No, Mrs. Landry, I can't ask that of you. You're not asking, dear, she said gently. I'm offering. Before I could respond, another spirit pushed forward. A young man, probably in his early 20s, with a desperate look in his eyes. Morrison, he called out. Remember me? Dave Pearson. We were on the high school baseball team together. I squinted, trying to place him. Dave? Yeah, I think I remember. You were a year ahead of me, right? He nodded eagerly. That's right. Listen, man, I know we weren't close or anything, but I need you to hear me out. I died young, in a stupid car accident. I never got to live my life, you know? Please, don't pick me. I'm not ready to be stuck here forever. More spirits pressed in, each with their own story, their own plea. Some offered to stay behind, their voices resigned. Others begged to be spared, their eyes wild with fear. The cacophony of voices grew overwhelming, each one tugging at my conscience in a different way. Enough, my father's voice boomed out, silencing the crowd. Give him space, this isn't a decision to be made lightly or under pressure. The spirits backed away, their eyes still fixed on me. I felt the weight of their gazes, the burden of their hopes and fears. What do I do, Dad? I whispered, feeling lost and overwhelmed. He looked at me, his eyes filled with a mixture of pride and sorrow. You think, son. You consider every angle, every consequence, and in the end, you make the choice you can live with. I nodded, taking a deep breath. How long do I have? As if in answer, a ghostly clock appeared in the air before me, its hands ticking away steadily. 23:58. 23:57, 23:56. 24 hours, I murmured. 24 hours to make an impossible choice. Use the time wisely, Dad advised. Talk to people, learn their stories. Try to understand the full weight of your decision. I looked out at the sea of faces surrounding me, each one a life cut short, a story unfinished. How could I possibly choose? How could anyone? But as the clock ticked down, and the spirits watched me with hopeful, fearful eyes, I knew I had to find a way. Somewhere in this twilight realm, in the stories of these lost souls, there had to be an answer. There had to be a way to make this impossible choice. With a heavy heart and a determined spirit, I set out to explore this limbo, to hear the tales of the dead, and to search for a solution that wouldn't damn my soul or theirs. The next 24 hours would be the most important of my life, and quite possibly my afterlife as well. As I wandered through the ethereal landscape of this limbo, the weight of my decision pressed down on me like a physical force. The ghostly clock ticked away in the corner of my vision, a constant reminder of the impossible choice I had to make. Each face I encountered, each story I heard, only made the decision more difficult. I had been walking for what felt like hours when I heard a familiar voice call out to me. "Jack, is that really you?" I turned to see a face I never thought I'd see again. Rachel, my high school sweetheart, stood before me. She looked just as she did the last time I saw her, eternally young and beautiful, but there was a sadness in her eyes that hadn't been there in life. "Rachel," I breathed, hardly believing my eyes. I can't believe you're here." She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Yeah, well, drunk drivers don't discriminate. It's been a long time, Jack." I nodded, feeling a lump form in my throat. Rachel and I had dated all through high school and into our first year of college. We had big plans, dreams of a future together. But then came the accident, and everything changed. "I'm so sorry, Rachel," I said, reaching out to her before remembering I couldn't actually touch her. "I should have been there. I should have..." She shook her head, cutting me off. "It wasn't your fault, Jack. These things happen. But now you have a chance to make it right." I frowned, not understanding. "What do you mean?" Rachel moved closer, her form shimmering in the strange light. "You have to choose someone to stay behind, right? Choose me, Jack. We can be together again, just like we always planned." "What?" I stepped back, shocked. "Rachel, no. I can't condemn you to stay here forever." She laughed, but there was a bitter edge to it. "Condemn me? Jack, I'm already dead. But this way, at least part of me would live on through you. Don't you want that? Don't you want us to be together again?" For a moment I was tempted. The idea of carrying a part of Rachel with me, of giving her a second chance at life in some way. It was seductive, but then I saw the desperation in her eyes, the hunger that seemed to consume her, and I knew it wasn't really Rachel talking. It was this place, twisting her into something she wasn't. "I'm sorry, Rachel," I said, stepping back further. "But that's not how it works, and it's not what you really want. I have to find another way." Her face contorted with anger and pain. "Fine. Leave me here to rot, just like you did before." As I turned to walk away, her words echoing in my ears, I almost ran into another familiar face. This one, however, was far less welcome. Well, if it isn't Jack Morrison," sneered a voice I hadn't heard in years but would never forget. I found myself face to face with Brad Johnson, my childhood bully. He looked older than I remembered, but there was no mistaking that cruel smirk. Or at least there wouldn't have been if it wasn't tinged with something I'd never seen on Brad's face before. Remorse. "Brad," I said, my voice cold. "I wish I could say it's good to see you." He flinched at my tone, his bravado crumbling. "Yeah, I guess I deserve that. Look, Jack, I know I was a real piece of work back then. I've had a lot of time to think about it here, and I'm sorry. For everything." I stared at him, stunned. This was not the Brad Johnson I remembered. The bully who had made my life hell for years looked broken. I know it doesn't make up for what I did, he continued, his voice shaking, but I want you to know that I regret it. All of it. And if you need someone to stay behind, well, maybe it would be a fitting punishment for me. I shook my head, feeling a mix of emotions I couldn't quite sort out. Brad, I appreciate the apology, but I can't do that. Not even to you. He nodded, a sad smile on his face. You always were a better person than me, Morrison. I hope you find a way out of this mess. As Brad's form faded into the mist, I felt a gentle tap on my shoulder. I turned to see Mrs. Hendricks, my favorite high school English teacher, smiling at me. Jack, my dear boy, she said warmly. It's wonderful to see you, though I wish it were under better circumstances. Mrs. Hendricks, I said, feeling a wave of affection for the kind-faced woman who had encouraged my love of literature. I'm so sorry you're stuck here. She waved her hand dismissively. Oh, don't worry about me. I've lived a full life, but you, Jack, you have so much ahead of you, so much potential. Before I could respond, the world around us shimmered and changed. Suddenly I was looking at myself, but not as I was now. This was an older Jack, gray at the temples, standing at a podium accepting. Was that a Pulitzer Prize? This could be your future, Jack. Mrs. Hendricks's voice came from everywhere and nowhere. The novel you always talked about writing. You could make it a reality. The scene shifted again. Now I saw myself in a beautiful home, surrounded by a loving family. Children played in a sunlit yard while my older self watched, arm in arm with a woman I didn't recognize, but somehow knew I loved deeply. All of this could be yours, Mrs. Hendricks continued. A life full of love, success, and happiness. All you have to do is let me stay behind. Let me give you the future you deserve. I squeezed my eyes shut, trying to block out the tempting visions. Stop it, I whispered. Please just stop. When I opened my eyes, we were back in the misty limbo. Mrs. Hendricks looked at me with understanding in her eyes. I'm sorry, Jack, she said softly. I shouldn't have tempted you like that, but you must understand, and we're all scared here. Scared of being forgotten, of being left behind. You represent hope for us. I nodded, feeling tears prick at my eyes. I understand. But I can't make that choice. There has to be another way. As Mrs. Hendricks faded away, I found myself face to face with the one person I had been both longing for and dreading to see again. My father. Dad, I said, my voice cracking. I don't know what to do. Everyone here. They all have reasons to go back, reasons to stay. How am I supposed to choose? My father looked at me with eyes full of pride and sorrow. You're not, son. No one should have to make a choice like this. But if it comes down to it, you know I'd stay for you, right? I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. Dad, no, I can't ask you to do that, I won't. He smiled sadly. You're not asking, Jack, I'm offering. You have your whole life ahead of you. Sarah's waiting for you. Maybe someday grandchildren I'll never get to meet. If staying here means you get to live that life, well, it's an easy choice for me. I shook my head vehemently, tears now flowing freely. It's not an easy choice for me, Dad. How could I leave you here? How could I live with myself knowing you're trapped in this place because of me? The same way I've lived with myself knowing I left you too soon, he replied gently, with love and the knowledge that it was for a greater good. As I stood there, torn between my love for my father and my instinct for self-preservation, the ghostly clock in my vision ticked down to its final hours. The weight of my decision pressed down on me, heavier than ever. I realized then the true magnitude of what I was being asked to do. This wasn't just about choosing who stayed and who went. It was about playing God, deciding the fate of souls. Who was I to make such a choice? What gave me the right? But as the seconds ticked away, I knew I had to decide. Stay and be trapped forever, or choose someone to take my place. The temptations I had faced, love, redemption, success, family, swirled in my mind, each pulling me in a different direction. With time running out, I closed my eyes, took a deep breath, and prepared to make the hardest decision of my life, or afterlife. Whatever choice I made, I knew it would haunt me forever. But choose I must, for the alternative was unthinkable. As I opened my eyes, ready to speak my choice, a new voice cut through the mist. A voice I hadn't heard before, but one that would change everything. As the clock ticked down to its final hours, a desperate plan began to form in my mind. I couldn't bear the thought of sacrificing anyone, not even to save myself. There had to be another way, and I was determined to find it. I gathered the spirits around me, my voice urgent as I explained my idea. Listen, all of you. We've been thinking about this all wrong. We don't have to choose who stays behind. We can work together to get out of here. My father frowned, concern etched on his face. Jack, what are you talking about? The entity said. I know what the entity said, I interrupted, my words tumbling out in a rush. But we don't have to play by its rules. We're stronger together. If we all work as one, we might just have a chance. Rachel stepped forward, hope glimmering in her eyes for the first time. What's your plan, Jack? I took a deep breath, steeling myself. The well. It's our connection to the living world. If we can reach it, we might be able to break through. But it's so far above us, Tommy said, his young face scrunched in confusion. How could we possibly reach it? A smile spread across my face. We'll make a ladder. A human ladder. The spirits around me murmured, a mix of excitement and skepticism rippling through the crowd. My father placed a hand on my shoulder, his touch ethereal but comforting. Son, are you sure about this? It's risky. If it doesn't work... I nodded, determination burning in my chest. I'm sure, Dad. It's our only chance. I won't leave anyone behind. With renewed purpose, we set our plan into motion. The spirits organized themselves, forming a towering column that stretched upwards towards the distant pinprick of light that marked the well's opening. It was a surreal sight, ghostly forms stacked upon each other, shimmering and translucent, yet somehow solid enough to bear weight. I stood at the base of the human ladder, looking up at the daunting climb ahead. My father stood beside me, worry etched on his face. Jack, he said softly, you don't have to do this. There's still time to make another choice. I shook my head, resolute. No, Dad. This is the right thing to do. I can feel it. With a deep breath, I began to climb. The sensation was bizarre. The spirits were solid enough to hold me, but I could feel the chill of their ethereal forms seeping into my bones. As I ascended, their whispers of encouragement buoyed me upward. You can do it, Jack. We believe in you. Don't look down. Halfway up, the climb became more challenging. Some spirits, driven by jealousy or desperation, began to reach for me, trying to pull me back down. Why should you escape and not us? A bitter voice hissed. Take me with you, another pleaded, fingers grasping at my ankles. I gritted my teeth, pushing upward with renewed determination. I'm doing this for all of us, I gasped. We're in this together. The higher I climbed, the more resistance I faced. Hands clawed at me from all sides, some supportive, others desperate to drag me back. The air grew colder, thinner, making each breath a struggle. Through the chaos, I heard my father's voice ring out from below. Keep going, son. Don't give up. His words gave me strength, and I pressed on. The pinprick of light grew larger, brighter. I could feel warmth on my face. Sunlight. Real sunlight. So close I could almost taste it. With a final Herculean effort, I stretched my arm upward. My fingertips grazed the edge of the well, feeling the rough texture of sun-warmed stone. A surge of triumph coursed through me. We had done it. We had reached the living world. But in that moment of victory, disaster struck. The spirit directly beneath me, overwhelmed by the weight and the chaos, lost their grip. Like a line of dominoes, The entire human ladder began to collapse. I clung desperately to the edge of the well, my other hand reaching down to grab the nearest spirit. But it was no use. The force of the collapsing tower was too strong. "No!" I cried out as I felt myself being pulled back into the abyss. The light of the living world grew smaller, more distant. Darkness engulfed me as I plummeted downward, the cries of the spirits echoing around me. I squeezed my eyes shut, bracing for impact. But instead of the hard ground of the spirit realm, I felt something soft beneath me. My eyes flew open. I was in my bed. Sunlight streamed through the window, and I could hear birds chirping outside. Sarah lay beside me, still asleep, her chest rising and falling with peaceful breaths. For a long moment, I just lay there, my heart pounding. Had it all been a dream? The spirits, the entity, the impossible choice? Had it all been a product of my imagination? I sat up slowly, running a hand through my sweat-soaked hair. Everything felt so real, so vivid. I could still feel the chill of the spirit realm on my skin, still hear the echoes of their voices in my ears. But as I looked around our familiar bedroom, doubt began to creep in. Maybe it had just been an incredibly vivid nightmare. Maybe the stress of the drought and the strange occurrences had finally gotten to me. I slipped out of bed, careful not to wake Sarah, and made my way to the window. The backyard looked normal in the early morning light. The well stood silent and still, showing no signs of the otherworldly portal it had been in my dream. As I stared at the well, a chill ran down my spine. For just a moment, I thought I saw a flicker of movement in its depths, a flash of blue light gone as quickly as it appeared. I shook my head, trying to clear it. "Get a grip, Jack," I muttered to myself. It was just a dream. Just a dream. But as I turned away from the window, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed. Dream or not, I had been through an experience that had altered me profoundly. The weight of the choice I had almost been forced to make still pressed on my conscience. I made my way to the kitchen, my mind whirling. As I started the coffee maker, I resolved to investigate further. Dream or reality, I needed answers. The well, the drought, the whispers, there had to be a connection, a rational explanation for it all. As the aroma of brewing coffee filled the air, I leaned against the counter, my gaze drawn once again to the well outside. Whatever the truth was, I was determined to uncover it. But a part of me couldn't help but wonder, if it had all been real, what had happened to the spirits I left behind? And more importantly, had my failed escape attempt changed anything in their realm, or in ours? With these questions swirling in my mind, I poured myself a cup of coffee and prepared to face the day. Whatever lay ahead, I knew one thing for certain: nothing would ever be quite the same again. The morning sun filtered through the kitchen window, casting long shadows across the tile floor. I sipped my coffee, trying to shake off the lingering unease from my supposed dream. Sarah shuffled into the kitchen, her hair tousled from sleep. "Morning, honey," she yawned, reaching for a mug. "You're up early." I nodded, forcing a smile. "Yeah, just couldn't sleep." As Sarah poured her coffee, I glanced out the window again. For a moment, I could have sworn I saw a familiar figure standing by the well. My father, watching me with sad eyes. I blinked, and he was gone. "Jack?" Sarah's voice snapped me back to reality. "You okay? You look like you've seen a ghost." I laughed nervously, the sound hollow even to my own ears. "Just tired, I guess." "Hey, I think I'm going to run to the hardware store. We need, some stuff for the well." Sarah frowned, concern etching her features. "Okay, if you're sure. Just be careful, all right? You haven't been yourself lately." I kissed her cheek, trying to reassure her. "I'm fine, really. I'll be back soon." As I drove into town, the world around me seemed to shimmer and shift. At a stoplight, I saw Mrs. Landry walking her spectral dog on the sidewalk. She waved at me, a sad smile on her translucent face. I waved back instinctively, then froze as I realized what I was doing. The car behind me honked, jolting me back to awareness. The light was green, and Mrs. Landry was nowhere to be seen. I drove on, my knuckles white on the steering wheel. At the hardware store, things only got stranger. As I wandered the aisles looking for rope and other supplies I might need for the well, I kept seeing flashes of familiar faces. Tommy peeked out from behind a stack of paint cans. Rachel browsed the gardening section, her form flickering like an old movie. "Can I help you find anything, sir?" a clerk asked, making me jump. I turned to face him, ready to decline, when I saw Brad Johnson standing right behind the clerk, smirking at me. "Yeah, Jack," Brad's ghost taunted. "Need help finding your marbles?" I shook my head violently, backing away. No, I'm fine, just looking." The clerk gave me an odd look but shrugged and walked away. Brad's ghost lingered, his eyes boring into me. "You left us there, Jack," he hissed. "You promised to help, and then you abandoned us, some hero you turned out to be." "Shut up," I muttered, drawing curious glances from other shoppers. "You're not real. None of this is real." I hurried to the checkout, paid for my supplies, and practically ran to my car. As I sat in the parking lot trying to calm my racing heart, I saw my father in the rearview mirror. "Son," he said, his voice filled with concern. "You need to face this. You can't keep running." I squeezed my eyes shut. "You're not here. You're dead. This isn't real." When I opened my eyes, he was gone, but the weight of his words lingered. I drove home in a daze, my mind reeling. Was I losing my grip on reality? Had that nightmarish journey through the spirit realm broken something in my psyche? Sarah was waiting for me when I got home, worry evident in her eyes. "Jack, we need to talk. I'm really concerned about you." I nodded, feeling a wave of guilt wash over me. "I know, I'm sorry, I've just been going through some things." We sat at the kitchen table, the well visible through the window behind Sarah. As she spoke, expressing her fears and confusion, I kept seeing flickers of movement around her, spirits watching us, their eyes pleading and accusing. "Jack, are you even listening to me?" Sarah's voice cut through my distraction. I focused on her face, trying to ignore the ghostly figures I saw in my peripheral vision. "I'm sorry, Sarah. I know I've been distant. It's just... there's something I need to figure out. Something to do with the well." Sarah's expression hardened. "The well? Jack? It's a hole in the ground. What could possibly be so important about it that you're risking our relationship?" As I struggled to find the words to explain, a chill swept through the room. The lights flickered, and a deep, resonant voice filled my head. "Time is running out, Jack Morrison." I stood up so quickly I knocked over my chair. There, in our kitchen, stood the entity from the spirit realm. Its form of swirling shadows and starlight was incongruous against the cheerful yellow walls. "Jack?" Sarah's voice sounded distant, confused. "What's wrong? What are you looking at?" I realized she couldn't see the entity. To her, I must look completely unhinged. The entity spoke again, its voice bypassing my ears and resonating directly in my mind. "The balance must be restored. A choice must be made. You cannot escape your destiny, Jack Morrison." "Leave me alone," I shouted, backing away. "This isn't real. It can't be real." Sarah stood up, reaching for me. "Jack, please, you're scaring me. There's no one else here. Let me call a doctor." I shook my head vehemently. No doctors. I'm not crazy, Sarah. I need to end this. I need to make it stop." Before she could respond, I bolted out the back door, heading straight for the well. I could hear Sarah calling after me, her voice filled with fear and confusion. But I couldn't stop. I had to end this madness. As I approached the well, the air around me seemed to thicken. The spirits I had seen in town, in the house, they all converged here. Their whispers filled the air, a cacophony of pleas and accusations. "Help us, Jack. Don't leave us behind. You promised. Make your choice." I stood at the edge of the well, looking down into its depths. The rope I had bought at the hardware store was clutched in my hand, though I couldn't remember grabbing it. "Enough!" I shouted into the well. "I'm ready to make my choice. I'm ready to end this." The entity materialized before me, its void-like face unreadable. "Very well, Jack Morrison, what is your decision?" I took a deep breath, steeling myself. The faces of all those I had encountered in the spirit realm flashed through my mind. My father, Rachel, Tommy, Mrs. Hendricks, even Brad. I thought of Sarah, probably calling the police right now, convinced her husband had lost his mind. "My choice is," I began, but was cut off by Sarah's scream. "Jack, no, step away from the well." I turned to see her running towards me, terror etched on her face. In that moment of distraction, I felt a push from behind. Whether it was a spirit or just my own unbalanced mind, I couldn't say. But suddenly I was falling, tumbling into the darkness of the well. As I fell, I heard Sarah's scream mix with the whispers of the spirits. The entity's voice boomed in my mind one last time. "The choice has been made." Then everything went black. I don't know how long I was unconscious. When I came to, I was lying at the bottom of the well, cold water seeping into my clothes. I could see a circle of sky far above me, and hear Sarah's frantic voice calling my name. As I lay there, trying to make sense of what had happened, I realized something had changed. The whispers were gone. The oppressive presence of the spirits had lifted. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, my mind was clear. But as relief washed over me, a new fear took hold. Had I made my choice without realizing it? And if so, what were the consequences? As Sarah's voice grew more distant, probably running to call for help, I closed my eyes, exhausted and confused. Whatever I had set in motion, there was no going back now. The lines between the world of the living and the dead had been irrevocably blurred, and I was caught in the middle. The world around me seemed to blur and shift, the bottom of the well fading away. Suddenly, I found myself standing at the edge of the well once more, my heart pounding in my chest. The entity's words echoed in my mind. "The choice has been made." But had it? I felt as if I was being given one last chance, one final moment to decide the fate of not just myself, but of all the souls trapped in that twilight realm. Before me stood Brad Johnson, my childhood bully, his spectral form flickering in the fading daylight. His eyes, once filled with cruel mirth, now showed only fear and desperation. "Please, Jack," he pleaded, his voice a ghostly whisper. "Don't do this. I know I was terrible to you, but I've changed. I've suffered. Isn't that enough?" I felt the weight of the decision pressing down on me. Here was my chance to escape, to return to my normal life with Sarah. All I had to do was condemn Brad to an eternity in limbo. After all the pain he'd caused me, shouldn't it be an easy choice? My hand trembled as I reached out towards him. "I'm sorry, Brad," I said, my voice barely audible. "But I have to get back to Sarah. I have to live my life." Brad's form began to fade, as if being pulled back towards the well. "No, Jack, please, I'll do anything." In that moment, as I watched the terror in Brad's eyes, something inside me broke. I couldn't do it. No matter what he'd done, no matter how much I wanted to return to my normal life, I couldn't condemn another soul to that fate. "Stop," I shouted, pulling my hand back. "I won't do it. I can't." The world around us froze. Brad's form solidified, confusion replacing the fear in his eyes. From the depths of the well, a familiar voice resonated. "Well done, Jack Morrison." The entity emerged from the well, its form of shadows and starlight more dazzling than ever in the fading daylight. It stood before us, its void-like face unreadable. "What's going on?" I asked, my voice shaking. I thought I had to choose someone to stay behind. The entity's form shimmered, almost as if it was laughing. "That was never the true test, Jack Morrison. The choice was always about you, about your humanity." Brad looked between us, bewildered. "I don't understand. What's happening?" I shook my head, equally confused. "Neither do I, Brad, but I think..." I think we're both going to be okay. The entity's voice filled the air once more. You have shown great compassion, Jack Morrison. Even when faced with the opportunity to condemn someone who had wronged you, you chose mercy. This is the true mark of a worthy soul. A wave of relief washed over me, quickly followed by suspicion. So what now? Do we all get to go home? Is this nightmare over? The entity's form seemed to grow more solid, more present. Not quite, Jack Morrison. There is still one final choice to be made. Your choice. I felt a chill run down my spine. What do you mean, my choice? You have proven yourself worthy of a great gift, or perhaps a great burden, the entity explained. You can choose to return to your life, to Sarah, and the world of the living. But you will retain the ability to see and communicate with the dead. You will be a bridge between worlds, able to help lost souls find their way. The implications of this gift hit me like a physical blow. To be able to see the dead, to hear their whispers and pleas everywhere I went. Could I handle that? Would Sarah understand? Or would she think I'd lost my mind? And if I refuse? I asked, my mouth dry. The entity's form flickered. Then you will return to your life as it was before. The well will be sealed, and the barrier between worlds restored. You will remember nothing of this ordeal. I looked at Brad, who was watching me with a mix of hope and fear. Then I thought of my father, of Rachel, of all the souls I'd encountered in that twilight realm. Could I really turn my back on them? Jack, Brad said softly, whatever you choose, thank you. For not condemning me, for showing me that people can change. I nodded, feeling the weight of the decision pressing down on me. On one hand, I could return to my normal life with Sarah, free from the burden of seeing the dead. On the other, I could help lost souls, be a beacon of hope in the darkness between worlds. But at what cost to my own sanity, to my relationship with Sarah? I need to think, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. The entity nodded, or at least I thought it did. It was hard to tell with its featureless face. Take your time, Jack Morrison. This decision will shape not just your future, but the futures of countless souls. I closed my eyes, trying to sort through the chaos in my mind. I thought of Sarah, of the life we had built together. I thought of my father, trapped in that twilight realm, and all the other souls yearning for peace. I thought of the nightmares, the whispers, the constant presence of the dead that would become my new reality if I accepted this gift. When I opened my eyes, I saw that the sun had almost set. The world around us was bathed in twilight, the boundary between day and night as blurred as the line between life and death had become for me. I've made my decision, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. The entity leaned forward, its starlight form brightening. And what is your choice, Jack Morrison? I took a deep breath, steeling myself for the consequences of my words. I choose. Suddenly, Sarah's voice cut through the twilight. Jack? Jack, where are you? I turned to see her approaching, her face etched with worry. For a moment, I wondered if she could see the entity, see Brad's ghost, see the choice I was about to make. I'm here, Sarah, I called back, my voice cracking slightly. As she drew nearer, I saw confusion replace the worry in her eyes. Jack, who are you talking to? What's going on? In that moment, I realized that she couldn't see what I saw. To her, I was standing alone at the edge of the well, talking to thin air. The reality of what accepting the entity's gift would mean hit me full force. I turned back to the entity, my decision crystallizing. I choose. But before I could finish, the world around me began to spin. The twilight deepened, shadows elongating and merging. I felt as if I was falling, tumbling through space and time. The last thing I heard was the entity's voice echoing through the darkness. The choice has been made, Jack Morrison. Now live with the consequences. Then darkness consumed me once more. When I opened my eyes, I found myself lying in bed. sunlight streaming through the window. Sarah slept peacefully beside me, her chest rising and falling with each breath. For a moment, I lay there, trying to make sense of what had happened. Had it all been a dream? A vivid hallucination brought on by stress and an overactive imagination? But as I sat up, I caught a glimpse of movement in the corner of the room. There, watching me with sad eyes, stood my father. "Morning, son," he said, his voice a ghostly whisper. "Looks like we have a lot to talk about." I closed my eyes, took a deep breath, and prepared to face my new reality. The choice had been made, for better or worse. Now, I had to learn to live with it. As I opened my eyes to face my spectral father, I couldn't help but wonder, had I made the right choice? And more importantly, what would this mean for my future? For Sarah, and for all the lost souls now counting on me? Only time would tell. But one thing was certain, my life would never be the same again. The morning sun filtered through the curtains, casting long shadows across the bedroom floor. I sat on the edge of the bed, my head in my hands, trying to come to terms with the choice I had made. Sarah stirred behind me, her voice thick with sleep. "Jack, what's wrong? Did you have another nightmare?" I turned to face her, seeing the concern in her eyes. How could I explain what had happened? How could I make her understand the weight of the decision I had made? "Sarah," I began, my voice barely above a whisper. "I need to tell you something. Something that's going to sound crazy." She sat up, fully awake now, her brow furrowed with worry. "What is it, Jack? You're scaring me." I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what was to come. "I can see them, Sarah. The dead. I can see and hear them, and they need my help." The words hung in the air between us, heavy and impossible. Sarah's face went through a range of emotions: confusion, disbelief, fear. "What are you talking about, Jack?" she asked, her voice trembling. "This isn't funny." "I'm not joking, Sarah," I said, reaching for her hand. She pulled away, and the gesture cut deeper than I thought possible. "Last night, at the well, something happened. I made a choice, and now I can see them. All of them." As if on cue, my father's ghost appeared in the corner of the room. "You need to be patient with her, son," he said softly. "This isn't easy for anyone to understand." Sarah followed my gaze to the empty corner, her eyes wide with fear. "Who are you talking to, Jack? There's no one there." I closed my eyes, feeling the weight of my new reality pressing down on me. "It's my dad, Sarah. He's here. He's been here all along." The next few weeks were a blur of arguments, tears, and desperate attempts to make Sarah understand. I tried to prove my ability to her, relaying messages from departed loved ones, revealing secrets only the dead could know. But with each revelation, I saw her pulling further away, fear and doubt replacing the love in her eyes. 1 month after my fateful choice at the well, I came home to find Sarah packing her bags. "I can't do this anymore, Jack," she said, her voice breaking. "I don't know what's happened to you, but I can't live like this. I can't watch you talk to empty rooms. Can't bear the way you look at things I can't see." I reached for her, my heart breaking. "Please, Sarah, I know it's hard to understand, but I'm still me. I still love you." She shook her head, tears streaming down her face. "The Jack I loved wouldn't choose ghosts over me. I'm sorry, but I can't stay." As the door closed behind her, I sank to the floor, surrounded by the spirits of the dead. My father knelt beside me, his ghostly hand passing through my shoulder in an attempt at comfort. "I'm so sorry, son," he said softly. "I never wanted this for you." I looked up at him, my vision blurred with tears. "Then why, Dad? Why did this happen to me?" He sighed, a sound that seemed to carry the weight of the afterlife. "Because you have a gift, Jack. A burden, yes, but also a gift. You can help people, both the living and the dead, in ways no one else can. In the years that followed, I learned to navigate my new reality. I became known in certain circles as a medium, someone who could communicate with the dead and help lost souls find peace. It wasn't an easy life, but it was a purposeful one. I helped a young woman find closure by delivering a final message from her deceased fiancé. I guided a restless spirit to the light, finally allowing him to move on after decades of being trapped. I even helped solve cold cases, providing information that only the victims could have known. But with each soul I helped, the weight of my gift grew heavier. The constant presence of the dead, their whispers and pleas, began to take its toll. I found myself withdrawing from the world of the living, more comfortable in the company of ghosts than people. 5 years after my choice at the well, I found myself drawn back to where it all began. The drought had worsened over the years, and the well now stood dry and silent, a stark reminder of the choice that had changed everything. As I approached the well, I saw familiar faces shimmer into existence around me. My father, looking just as he had the day he died. Rachel, forever young and beautiful. Even Brad, his ghostly form a constant reminder of the mercy I had shown. "Why did you bring us here, Jack?" Rachel asked, her voice echoing strangely in the still air. I shook my head, unsure myself. "I don't know, I needed to see it again to remember." My father stepped forward, his eyes filled with understanding. "You're questioning your choice, aren't you, son?" I nodded, unable to speak past the lump in my throat. The weight of the past 5 years, of all the souls I'd helped and all I'd lost, pressed down on me. "It's okay to have doubts, Jack," Brad said, his voice gentler than I'd ever heard it in life. "What you do, it's not easy, but it matters." I approached the edge of the well, peering down into its depths. The last time I had stood here, I had been faced with an impossible choice. Now, I found myself wondering if I had made the right one. As I gazed into the darkness, something strange began to happen. The bottom of the well seemed to shimmer and shift, like a mirage in the desert. Slowly, an image began to form, my own reflection staring back at me. But I wasn't alone in the reflection. Behind me, I saw faces, hundreds, maybe thousands of them. Every soul I had helped over the past 5 years, every life I had touched, both living and dead. "Do you see now, Jack?" My father's voice came from beside me. "This is your legacy. This is why you were chosen." I turned to face the spirits gathered around me, tears streaming down my face. "But at what cost?" I asked, my voice breaking. "I've lost everything, Sarah, my normal life, my peace of mind." Rachel stepped forward, her ghostly hand reaching for mine. Though I couldn't feel her touch, I felt the warmth of her presence. "You haven't lost everything, Jack. You've gained a purpose. You've brought peace to so many. And you're not alone," Brad added. "We're all here with you, always." As I stood there, surrounded by the spirits of those I'd helped and those who had shaped my life, I felt something shift inside me. The weight of my gift, which had felt so crushing for so long, began to feel more like a mantle. Heavy, yes, but also empowering. I turned back to the well, looking once more at the reflection of myself and the countless faces behind me. This was my burden, yes, but it was also my redemption. In helping these lost souls and bridging the gap between the world of the living and the dead, I had found a purpose greater than myself. "Thank you," I whispered, to the spirits around me, to the entity that had given me this choice, to the universe itself. I understand now. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the dry earth, I made my way back home. The spirits followed, a silent procession of the souls I had helped and those I had yet to aid. For the first time in years, I felt a sense of peace settle over me. I may have lost my old life, but I had gained something far more valuable, a chance to make a real difference, to bring peace to those who needed it most. As I walked, I heard my father's voice one last time, carried on the evening breeze. I'm proud of you, son. You've chosen a difficult path, but it's the right one. And in that moment, I knew he was right. This was my path, my purpose, my redemption. Whatever challenges lay ahead, whatever souls cried out for help in the darkness, I would be there. A bridge between worlds, a beacon of hope in the twilight realm between life and death. As I reached my front door, I paused, looking back at the spirits that had followed me home. They smiled, nodded, and slowly faded away, leaving me alone, but not lonely. For I knew now that I was never truly alone. My burden was my strength, my gift was my purpose, and in the faces of those I had helped I had found my true reflection. With a deep breath I stepped inside, ready to face whatever the night and the spirits might bring. The choice had been made, the aftermath weathered, and now, finally, I was at peace with my decision. The well may have been dry, but the well of compassion and purpose within me was deeper than ever. The bang jolted me awake like a gunshot in the night. My eyes flew open, heart hammering against my ribs as if trying to break free. For a moment I lay there, rigid as a corpse, staring at the ceiling. The darkness of my bedroom pressed down on me, thick and oppressive. What the hell was that? I turned my head slowly, muscles in my neck creaking like rusty hinges, to look at the red glow of my digital alarm clock. 3:17 a.m. The witching hour, my grandmother used to call it. When I was a kid, she'd tell me that's when the veil between worlds was thinnest, when things that shouldn't exist could slip through the cracks. Another sound broke the silence, a soft click, followed by the whisper of wood sliding against wood. My closet door. I'd know that sound anywhere. It had a distinctive whine, a result of the house settling over the years, but I hadn't gotten up to open it. And there was no breeze, no open window to explain it. I sat up slowly, sheets pooling around my waist. The air felt different, charged somehow, like the moment before a lightning strike. That's when I heard it. A giggle, muffled but unmistakable, coming from inside the closet. Hello? My voice came out as a croak, barely above a whisper. I cleared my throat and tried again. Is someone there? Silence answered me. I reached for the lamp on my bedside table, fumbling in the dark. My fingers brushed against the cord and I yanked it perhaps a bit too forcefully. Nothing happened. The bulb must have burned out. Shit, I muttered, reaching instead for my phone. I needed light, needed to see what the hell was going on. But when I pressed the power button, the screen remained stubbornly dark. Come on, you piece of crap. Another giggle, louder this time, echoed from the closet. It wasn't the laughter of a child. There was something off about it, something that made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. It sounded almost hungry. This isn't funny, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Whoever you are, get out of my house right now or I'm calling the cops. The laughter stopped abruptly, leaving behind a silence so complete it felt like a physical presence. I held my breath, straining my ears for any sound. Footsteps, breathing, anything. But there was nothing. Slowly, I swung my legs over the side of the bed. The floorboards creaked beneath my feet as I stood, and I winced at the sound. If there really was an intruder, I didn't want to give away my position. But a small, increasingly insistent part of my brain was starting to wonder if this was something worse than a burglar. I took a tentative step towards the closet, then another. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. 5 more steps and I'd be at the door. 4, 3. Hello? I tried again, my hand hovering inches from the doorknob. Is anyone in there? Silence. Maybe I'd imagined it all. Maybe it was just a dream and I was sleepwalking. It wouldn't be the first time. I'd once woken up in the bathtub, convinced I was on a boat in the middle of a storm. My fingers closed around the cool metal of the doorknob. I took a deep breath, steeling myself. Okay, I whispered. On 3. 1, 2. Before I could reach 3, the door burst open with such force that I stumbled backward, nearly losing my balance. A gust of icy air hit me, carrying with it the musty smell of old clothes and mothballs. But the closet beyond was pitch black, darker than it should have been. It was as if all the light in the room was being sucked into that inky void. "Hello?" I called out again, my voice shaking. "Who's there?" For a long moment there was nothing. Then slowly a pair of eyes opened in the darkness. They glowed with an eerie pale light, like twin moons in a starless sky. They weren't human eyes. They were too large, too round, and filled with an intelligence that sent a shiver down my spine. "Who are you?" I managed to choke out. The eyes blinked once, slowly. Then a mouth appeared below them, stretching into a grin that was far too wide, filled with teeth that gleamed like knives in the dark. "We've been waiting for you," a voice said, echoing as if from the bottom of a well. It wasn't one voice, but many, speaking in unison. For so very long. I tried to back away, but my legs wouldn't move. It was as if my feet had been glued to the floor. The grin widened impossibly further, and the laughter started again. That same muffled giggle I'd heard before, but now it was all around me, coming from every corner of the room. "No," I whispered, shaking my head. "This isn't real. This can't be real." "Oh, but it is," the voices said, dripping with amusement. "And now that you've opened the door, we can finally come out to play." A hand emerged from the darkness, pale, elongated, with too many joints in the fingers. It reached for me, and I could feel the cold radiating from it even from several feet away. I wanted to run. I wanted to scream, but I could only stand there, paralyzed with fear, as the hand inched closer and closer. Just as it was about to touch my face, I managed to squeeze my eyes shut. "Please," I whimpered. "Please, just let this be a dream." The laughter grew louder, drowning out everything else. I felt something brush against my cheek, cold as ice and smooth as polished bone. "Open your eyes," the voices whispered, right next to my ear. "Open your eyes and see what waits for you on the other side." Trembling, I did as I was told, but when my eyes fluttered open, I found myself staring at nothing. The closet door was closed. The room was silent, and the first rays of dawn were starting to peek through the curtains. I blinked, confused. Had it all been a dream? But as I turned to look at my alarm clock, my heart nearly stopped. It read 3:18 a.m. Only a minute had passed since I first woke up. And as I stood there, trying to make sense of what had happened, I heard it again. That soft, muffled giggle coming from behind the closet door. My heart pounding in my chest, I slammed the closet door shut with all my might. The wood splintered under the force, but I didn't care. I had to get out of there, away from whatever was lurking in the darkness. I sprinted towards my bedroom door, yanking it open and stumbling into the hallway. The house was eerily quiet, save for the sound of my ragged breathing. I raced down the stairs, taking them two at a time, nearly losing my footing in my haste. "Mom! Dad!" I shouted, my voice cracking with panic. But there was no response. The living room was empty, the kitchen dark and silent. I reached for the front door, my salvation just inches away. But as my fingers closed around the handle, the world seemed to shift and blur around me. For a moment everything went black, and when my vision cleared, I found myself standing back in my bedroom. "No," I whispered, spinning around in disbelief. "No, no, no." The laughter started again, but this time it wasn't coming from the closet. It seemed to emanate from every corner of the room, from the walls themselves. It was as if the entire house had come alive, mocking my futile attempt at escape. "This isn't real," I muttered, pressing my hands against my ears. "Wake up, damn it, wake up!" But the laughter only grew louder, a cacophony of giggles and chuckles that seemed to vibrate through my very bones. I could feel it in my chest, in my head, threatening to drive me mad. "What do you want?" I screamed, my voice hoarse. "Leave me alone." As if in response, I felt something brush against my back. I whirled around, but there was nothing there. Then I felt it again, this time on my arm. Invisible hands, cold and clammy, began to push me towards the closet. "No!" I dug my heels into the carpet, trying to resist. But it was like fighting against a strong current. My feet slid across the floor, inch by inch, bringing me closer to the looming darkness of the closet. "Help!" I cried out, knowing it was useless but unable to stop myself. "Somebody please help me." The invisible force grew stronger, shoving me forward with increasing urgency. I stumbled, nearly falling, and in that moment of imbalance, I was propelled the last few feet towards the closet. The door swung open of its own accord, revealing a yawning blackness beyond. It wasn't the familiar space filled with clothes and boxes, but a void so deep and dark it seemed to swallow all light. "No, please," I whimpered, tears streaming down my face. "I don't want to go in there." But my pleas fell on deaf ears. With one final mighty push, I was shoved into the closet. The door slammed shut behind me with a finality that sent a chill down my spine. Darkness enveloped me, absolute and suffocating. I couldn't see my hand in front of my face, couldn't tell which way was up or down. The laughter had stopped, replaced by a silence so complete it was deafening. Panic clawed at my throat. I spun around, hands outstretched, searching for the door. My fingers brushed against something that felt like wood, and I latched onto it desperately. "Let me out!" I screamed, pounding on the door with all my strength. "Please, somebody help me. I'm in here." I beat against the door until my fists ached, screaming myself hoarse. But no matter how loud I yelled, no one came. My cries for help were swallowed by the darkness, as if the very air around me was absorbing the sound. As my voice gave out, reduced to a raspy whisper, the laughter started again. It was different this time. Deeper, more sinister. It echoed around me, seeming to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. "Welcome," a voice said, smooth as silk and cold as ice. It wasn't one voice, but many, speaking in perfect unison. "We've been waiting for you." I pressed my back against the door, trying to make myself as small as possible. "Who are you?" I managed to croak out. "What do you want?" The laughter grew louder, reverberating through the darkness. "Who we are is not important," the voices said. "What matters is who you are, or rather, who you will become." A chill ran down my spine. "What does that mean?" "I don't understand." "Understanding will come in time," the voices replied, a hint of amusement in their tone. "For now, you need only know that you have been chosen." "Chosen for what?" I demanded, trying to inject some bravery into my voice. But it came out as more of a frightened squeak. The darkness seemed to press in closer, as if it were a living thing curious about its prey. "To join us, of course," the voices said. "To become part of something greater than yourself." I shook my head violently, even though I knew they couldn't see me. "No, I don't want any part of this. Just let me go." The laughter erupted again, louder than ever. It filled the space around me, pressing against my eardrums until I thought my head would explode. "Oh, little one," the voices cooed, sickly sweet. "You don't have a choice." Suddenly, I felt something brush against my cheek. I jerked away, but there was nowhere to go. The touch came again, this time on my arm, then my leg. Invisible hands were grabbing at me from all directions, their grip icy cold and unnaturally strong. I thrashed and fought, trying to break free, but it was useless. The hands were everywhere, pulling me deeper into the darkness. I could feel the void opening up beneath my feet, an endless pit ready to swallow me whole. "No," I screamed, my voice breaking. "Please, no." But my cries were drowned out by the laughter, growing louder and more maniacal with each passing second, as I felt myself being dragged down into the unfathomable depths. One thought burned in my mind. This was only the beginning of my descent into madness. The darkness that had enveloped me began to shift, like a living, breathing entity. As my eyes slowly adjusted, shapes emerged from the inky blackness. What should have been the familiar confines of my bedroom closet had transformed into something entirely different, something impossible. A long, twisted hallway stretched out before me, its walls warped and bent at unnatural angles. The floorboards beneath my feet were old and worn, their dark wood splintered and groaning under my weight. The air was thick with the musty scent of decay and something else, something I couldn't quite place but that made my skin crawl. "Hello?" I called out, my voice small and trembling. The hallway seemed to swallow the sound, muffling it until it was barely more than a whisper. "Is anyone there?" No answer came, save for the faint echo of my own voice bouncing off the twisted walls. Taking a deep breath, I steeled myself and took a tentative step forward. The floorboard creaked loudly beneath my foot, the sound unnaturally loud in the oppressive silence. I continued down the hallway, each step accompanied by the protesting groan of ancient wood. As I moved deeper into this impossible space, I noticed something that made my blood run cold. Doors lined the hallway on both sides, each one identical to the next, old, wooden, and painted a deep blood red. But it wasn't the doors themselves that filled me with dread. It was the whispers that seemed to emanate from behind them. As I passed each door, I could hear my name being called so soft it was barely audible. "Emily," the first door whispered, its voice like dry leaves rustling in the wind. "Emily," came another whisper from the opposite side, this one deeper, almost growling. With each step, the whispers grew more numerous, more insistent. "Emily, Emily, Emily." They called to me, some pleading, others demanding, all of them filled with an urgency that made my heart race. I quickened my pace, trying to outrun the whispers, but they only grew louder. The hallway seemed to stretch on endlessly, each turn revealing more doors, more voices calling my name. "Stop it," I muttered, pressing my hands against my ears. "Leave me alone." But the whispers persisted, worming their way into my head despite my efforts to block them out. Each door I passed seemed to vibrate with energy, as if whatever was behind them was trying to break free. Finally, unable to bear it any longer, I stopped in front of one of the doors. Its whisper was different from the others, somehow familiar yet distorted, like hearing my own voice played back on a warped tape. "Emily," it called, "open me. See what's inside." My hand hovered over the doorknob, trembling. Every instinct screamed at me to run, to get as far away from this place as possible. But a morbid curiosity took hold, a need to understand what was happening to me. "Okay," I whispered, more to myself than to the door. "Okay, I'll look." I wrapped my fingers around the doorknob, surprised by how cold it felt against my skin. But as I began to turn it, something strange happened. The metal began to crumble beneath my touch, disintegrating like sand slipping through an hourglass. I jerked my hand back with a gasp, watching in horror as the doorknob continued to deteriorate. Within seconds, it had completely turned to ash, a small pile of gray dust on the floor, the only evidence it had ever existed. "What the hell?" I breathed, staring at the spot where the doorknob had been. The whispers from the other doors grew louder, more frantic. My name echoed through the hallway, bouncing off the walls until it became a cacophony of sound. I clapped my hands over my ears and ran, desperate to escape the maddening chorus. I don't know how long I ran. Time seemed to have no meaning in this twisted place. The hallway bent and turned, sometimes defying the laws of physics, but always presenting more doors, more whispers. Just when I thought I couldn't take it anymore, when I was ready to collapse from exhaustion and terror, I saw something different ahead. The hallway came to an abrupt end, terminating in a large, ornate mirror that stretched from floor to ceiling. I approached it cautiously, my reflection growing clearer with each step. But as I drew nearer, I realized something was terribly wrong. The person staring back at me from the mirror wasn't quite me. It was my face, my body, but the expression was all wrong. While I knew my own features were contorted with fear and confusion, My reflection wore a sinister grin that stretched unnaturally wide across its face. Its eyes gleamed with a malevolent light that made my blood run cold. I stopped a few feet away from the mirror, unable to tear my gaze away from this twisted version of myself. "Who are you?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. The reflection's grin widened impossibly further, revealing rows of sharp needle-like teeth. When it spoke, its voice was like mine, but distorted, as if speaking through water. "I'm you, Emily," it said, its words dripping with malice. "The real you. The you that you've kept locked away all these years." I shook my head, taking a step back. "No, you're not me. You can't be." The reflection laughed, a harsh, grating sound that echoed through the hallway. "Oh, but I am. I'm every dark thought you've ever had, every cruel impulse you've suppressed. And now, thanks to this place, I'm finally free." As I watched in horror, the reflection began to move independently of me. It pressed its hands against the glass, which seemed to ripple like water at its touch. "Don't you want to shake hands with yourself, Emily?" it asked, its grin never faltering. "Don't you want to embrace who you really are?" I stumbled backward, my heart pounding in my chest. "Stay away from me." But the reflection continued to push against the mirror, the glass bulging outward as if it were made of thin plastic. I could hear it stretching, creaking under the pressure. "You can't run from yourself forever, Emily," my doppelganger called, its voice growing louder as more of it pushed through the mirror. "Sooner or later, you'll have to face the truth." I turned and ran, fleeing back down the twisted hallway. Behind me, I heard the sound of shattering glass and maniacal laughter. The whispers from the doors grew to a fever pitch, my name echoing endlessly as I raced past. "Emily, Emily, Emily!" I ran until my lungs burned and my legs felt like they would give out at any moment. But no matter how far I went, I could still hear the laughter of my reflection, growing closer with each passing second. As I rounded another impossible corner, I saw something ahead that made my heart leap. A door that looked different from the others. It was my bedroom door, standing incongruously at the end of this nightmare hallway. With the last of my strength, I sprinted towards it, the sound of pursuit growing ever closer behind me. I reached for the doorknob, praying it wouldn't turn to ash like the other. To my relief, it remained solid in my grasp. I wrenched the door open and threw myself through, slamming it shut behind me. For a moment, all was quiet. I leaned against the door, gasping for breath, my eyes squeezed shut. When I finally opened them, I found myself back in my familiar bedroom. But as relief began to wash over me, I heard it, a soft giggle coming from my closet. And as I turned to look, I saw my reflection in the mirror on my dresser, grinning that impossible grin. "Welcome home, Emily," it whispered. "We're going to have so much fun together." I stood frozen, my eyes locked on the mirror. My reflection grinned back at me, that unnatural, too wide smile stretching across its face. Then, impossibly, it began to move. Not mimicking my movements as a reflection should, but independently. It pressed its hands against the glass, which rippled like water. "No," I whispered, backing away. "This isn't real. It can't be." But even as I spoke, my reflection began to push through the mirror. It was like watching someone emerge from a vertical pool of mercury. First its hands, then arms, then head and torso. Within moments, my doppelganger stood before me, fully formed and terrifyingly real. Its eyes gleamed with malice as it took a step towards me. I stumbled backward, my back hitting the wall. There was nowhere to run. "What's the matter, Emily?" it asked, its voice a perfect, twisted echo of my own. "Aren't you happy to see me?" I swallowed hard, trying to keep my voice steady. What are you?" The doppelganger laughed, a sound that sent chills down my spine. "I told you before. I'm you. The real you. The you that you've been trying to hide all these years." We began to circle each other slowly, like animals sizing up their prey. I noticed with growing horror that every detail was perfect. The small scar on my left hand from a childhood accident, the tiny mole just below my right ear. It was me in every way except for those eyes, those terrible, gleaming eyes. "You're not me," I said, my voice stronger now. "You're some kind of monster." It clicked its tongue disapprovingly. Now, Emily. Is that any way to talk about yourself? After all, I know everything you know. Every secret, every shameful thought, every dark desire you've ever had. I shook my head vehemently. "You're lying. You can't possibly—" "Oh, but I can," it interrupted, its grin widening impossibly further. "Shall I prove it? Let's see. How about the time you stole money from Mom's purse to buy cigarettes when you were 14? Or maybe the cruel things you said about your best friend Sarah behind her back last year?" My blood ran cold. These were things I'd never told anyone. Things I'd tried to forget. The doppelganger continued, its voice dripping with malicious glee. "Or perhaps we should talk about your deepest, darkest fear, the one you've never admitted to anyone, not even yourself. The fear that you're just like your father, that one day you'll snap and hurt the people you love just like he did." "Stop it," I screamed, clamping my hands over my ears. "Shut up." But its voice seemed to bypass my ears entirely, echoing inside my head. "You can't silence me, Emily. I'm a part of you, the part you've been running from all your life. But you can't run anymore. It's time to embrace who you really are." Something inside me snapped. With a feral cry, I lunged at the doppelganger, my hands outstretched to grab it, to silence it, to destroy this twisted version of myself. But as my fingers should have closed around its throat, they passed right through, as if it were made of smoke. I stumbled, nearly falling, and spun around to face it again. The doppelganger stood there unperturbed, that infuriating grin still plastered across its face. "Tisk, tisk," it said, wagging a finger at me. "Temper, temper. Is that any way for a good girl to behave?" I stared at my hands in disbelief, then back at the doppelganger. "What are you?" I whispered. It spread its arms wide, as if presenting itself. "I'm everything you've ever wanted to be, Emily. Free. Uninhibited. Powerful. All the things you've denied yourself out of fear and shame." I shook my head, backing away. "No, you're wrong. I'm not like that. I'm not like you." The doppelganger's eyes flashed dangerously. "Oh, but you are. You just don't have the courage to admit it, but don't worry. I'm here to help you see the truth." It began to advance on me, its movements fluid and predatory. I retreated, my back hitting the wall once again. There was nowhere left to go. "Stay away from me," I warned, trying to keep the fear out of my voice. The doppelganger just laughed. That same chilling laugh I'd heard in my room earlier. "Or what? You'll try to hit me again? Face it, Emily, you can't hurt me. I'm a part of you." As it spoke, its form began to shimmer and blur around the edges. It was like watching heat waves rising from hot asphalt, distorting everything behind them. "What's happening?" I asked, unable to keep the tremor from my voice. The doppelganger's grin widened even further, stretching beyond the limits of what should have been physically possible. "The fun is just beginning, Emily. It's time for you to see what you're really capable of." Before I could respond, it began to melt. There's no other word for it. Its body seemed to liquefy, dripping and oozing like candle wax. But instead of pooling on the floor, the liquid darkness flowed towards the shadows in the corners of the room. "No!" I cried out, lunging forward again, but my hands closed on empty air. Within moments, the doppelganger had disappeared entirely, absorbed into the shadows. For a long moment, I stood there, my heart pounding in my chest. The room was silent, but I could feel something watching me, waiting. "Where are you?" I called out, my voice shaking. "Show yourself." A disembodied laugh echoed through the room, seeming to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. "I'm everywhere, Emily," the voice of my doppelganger whispered. "I'm in every shadow, every dark corner, and I'm inside you, waiting to be set free." I spun around, trying to locate the source of the voice, but it was futile. The shadows in the room seemed deeper now, more menacing. They writhed and twisted at the edges of my vision, but whenever I looked directly at them, they were still. "What do you want from me?" I asked, desperation creeping into my voice. The laugh came again, softer this time. "I want you to embrace your true self, Emily, to stop running from who you really are, and I'll be here, waiting, until you're ready to face the truth." With that, the presence seemed to recede. The shadows stilled, the oppressive atmosphere lifted slightly. But I knew it wasn't over. Whatever that thing was, that twisted version of myself, it was still out there, watching, waiting. I sank to the floor, my back against the wall, and buried my face in my hands. What was happening to me? Was I losing my mind? Or was this doppelganger right? Was there really a darker side of myself that I'd been denying all these years? As these questions swirled in my mind, I heard it again, that soft, muffled giggle coming from my closet. And I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to my core, that my nightmare was far from over. The doppelganger was out there hiding in the shadows, and sooner or later I would have to face it again, face myself. And I wasn't sure I was ready for what I might discover. I blinked, and in that split second, everything changed. The familiar contours of my bedroom melted away, replaced by an endless hallway that stretched out before me. The walls, once solid and reassuring, began to shift and twist, morphing into something entirely new and terrifying. "What's happening?" I whispered, my voice echoing off the newly formed walls. As if in response to my question, the hallway began to transform at an even more rapid pace. Walls sprouted from the floor, creating new passages and dead ends. The ceiling rose and fell unpredictably, sometimes so low I had to duck, other times disappearing into darkness high above. Within moments, I found myself standing at the entrance of a massive labyrinth. The walls were a patchwork of materials, here a section of rough stone, there a stretch of rusted metal, even patches that looked unsettlingly like human skin. The floor beneath my feet was constantly changing too, shifting from cold tile to damp earth to what felt like living tissue. I took a hesitant step forward, then another. The entrance behind me sealed shut, leaving me with no choice but to press on into the maze. "Hello?" I called out, my voice small and frightened in the vast space. "Is anyone there?" The only response was a faint echo of laughter, seeming to come from just around the next corner. It was the same chilling giggle I'd heard in my room in the closet, the laugh of my doppelganger. I started walking, trying to keep track of my turns, but it was useless. The labyrinth was constantly changing, paths appearing and disappearing at random. Left became right, up became down, and I quickly lost all sense of direction. The laughter continued, always just out of reach. Sometimes it seemed to come from behind me, other times from above or below. It was maddening, like trying to catch smoke with my bare hands. "Where are you?" I shouted, frustration overcoming my fear. "What do you want from me?" The laughter grew louder, echoing off the walls until it seemed to come from everywhere at once. "I want you to find yourself, Emily," my own voice replied, distorted and mocking. "Isn't that what you've always wanted?" I pressed on, taking turn after turn, my feet carrying me deeper into the maze. Time lost all meaning. It could have been minutes or hours or days. The laughter was my only companion, along with the constant, unsettling transformations of the labyrinth around me. Just as I was starting to think I might be making progress, I noticed something alarming. The walls were moving again, but this time they were closing in. The wide corridor I had been walking through was slowly but steadily narrowing. "No," I muttered, picking up my pace. "No, no, no." I broke into a run, desperately searching for a way out, but every turn led to another shrinking passage. The ceiling was lowering too, forcing me to hunch over as I ran. Finally, I found myself faced with a gap barely wide enough to squeeze through. I could see another chamber beyond, tantalizingly out of reach. Taking a deep breath, I turned sideways and began to inch my way through the narrow opening. The walls pressed against me from both sides, rough and cold and somehow alive. I could feel them pulsing, as if the entire labyrinth was breathing. "Come on," I grunted, pushing forward inch by agonizing inch. Almost there. Just when I thought I couldn't bear it any longer, when the pressure on my chest was so great I could barely breathe, I burst through into the chamber beyond. I fell to my knees, gasping for air, my heart pounding in my chest. When I finally looked up, what I saw made me question my sanity all over again. I was in a circular room, easily 50 feet across. But what truly caught my attention were the doors, dozens of them lining the walls from floor to ceiling, and every single one was an exact replica of my bedroom door. "What is this place?" I whispered, slowly getting to my feet. The laughter came again, but this time it seemed to emanate from behind every door simultaneously. "It's a choice, Emily," my doppelganger's voice replied. "Your choice." I approached one of the doors, my hand hovering over the familiar brass knob. But before I could touch it, I heard something that made my blood run cold. It was my own voice coming from the other side of the door, but not the mocking tones of my doppelganger. This was me, frightened and desperate. "Don't open it, Emily," my voice pleaded. "Please, whatever you do, don't open this door." I jerked my hand back as if burned. "What's going on?" I demanded, spinning around to address the room at large. "What's behind these doors?" The doppelganger's laughter rang out again. "Why don't you open one and find out?" I moved to another door, but again my own voice warned me away. "No, not this one. It's not safe. Please, Emily, listen to me." Door after door, the same thing happened. My own voice, begging and pleading, warning me not to open them. But with each rejection, my curiosity and frustration grew. "This is insane," I muttered, running my hands through my hair. "How am I supposed to get out of here if I can't open any doors?" "Who says you're supposed to get out?" the doppelganger replied, its voice dripping with amusement. "Maybe the point is to stay here, to face what's behind those doors." I shook my head violently. No, I don't accept that. There has to be a way out." I began to examine the room more closely, running my hands along the walls between the doors, searching for any hidden passages or secret switches. But there was nothing, just an endless array of identical doors, each one promising escape or doom. As I completed my circuit of the room, I found myself back at the first door I had approached. My hand hovered over the knob once again. "Emily, please," my voice begged from the other side. "Don't do this. You're not ready for what's in here." I hesitated, torn between the desperate need to escape and the warnings of myself. Was it really me on the other side, or just another trick? "What happens if I open the door?" I asked, not sure if I was addressing my other self or the doppelganger. There was a long pause before my voice replied, soft and sad. "You'll see the truth. About yourself, about everything. But once you see it, you can never unsee it. Are you sure you're ready for that?" I took a deep breath, my hand still poised above the doorknob. This was it. The moment of truth. Whatever lay beyond this door would change everything. But was I ready to face it? The laughter of my doppelganger echoed through the room once more, challenging and mocking. "What's it going to be, Emily? Are you brave enough to face yourself? Or will you stay trapped in this labyrinth forever, running from who you really are?" My fingers closed around the doorknob, cool metal pressing against my palm. It was now or never. With one last deep breath, I began to turn the handle, the warnings from my other self growing more frantic by the second. As the door swung open, a blinding light engulfed me. I squeezed my eyes shut, bracing myself for whatever horror awaited. But when I opened them again, I found myself in a startlingly familiar place, my bedroom. For a moment, relief washed over me. Had it all been a nightmare? Was I finally awake? But something felt off. The air was thick with tension, like the calm before a storm. And then I heard it. the soft creak of my closet door. Realization struck me like a bolt of lightning. I wasn't just back in my room. I was back at the beginning, mere moments before everything had started. "No," I whispered, my eyes fixed on the closet. "Not again." I lunged forward, determined to stop the door from slamming shut. But as my hands reached for the handle, they passed right through it, as if I were a ghost. "What the?" I gasped, staring at my hands in disbelief. The closet door slammed shut with a resounding bang, just as it had before. And then, right on cue, came the muffled laughter from inside. "This isn't happening," I muttered, backing away from the closet. "This can't be real." But it was happening, and it felt all too real. I watched, helpless, as the scene played out exactly as it had before. My past self woke up, confused and frightened. I approached the closet cautiously, called out, and then opened the door to find nothing. And then it started all over again. The room shifted, resetting itself. Once more I found myself standing by my bed, watching as the closet door began to creak open. "Stop!" I shouted, rushing towards it. But again, my hands passed through the door, unable to affect anything. This time, though, something was different. The laughter from the closet was louder, more maniacal. And when my past self opened the door, instead of emptiness, she was greeted by a pair of glowing red eyes. I watched in horror as she screamed and slammed the door shut, only for the room to reset once more. Loop after loop, the scene played out, each time with subtle, unsettling differences. Sometimes the laughter was replaced by weeping. Other times, shadowy tendrils reached out from the closet, grasping at my past self. In one particularly disturbing iteration, the closet door opened to reveal a mirror image of myself, grinning malevolently. I lost count of how many times I'd witnessed this twisted replay of events. 5 times? 10? It felt like an eternity, trapped in this nightmarish time loop. "Why is this happening?" I cried out, my voice hoarse from screaming warnings that went unheard. "What am I supposed to do?" As if in answer, something changed on the next loop. As the room reset for what I later realized was the 13th time, I noticed something new, a shadowy figure standing in the corner of the room. At first, I thought it might be another trick of the light, another cruel variation in this endless cycle. But as I focused on it, the figure became more distinct. It was tall and thin, cloaked in darkness that seemed to absorb the light around it. Where its face should have been, there was only a swirling void. "Who are you?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. The figure didn't respond. It remained motionless as the scene played out once again. The closet door creaking, the laughter, my past self's fear and confusion. But this time, as my past self approached the closet, the shadowy figure moved. Slowly, deliberately, it raised an arm and pointed directly at the closet. I shook my head, understanding dawning on me. "No," I said. "No, I can't go back in there. You don't know what's waiting." The figure turned its featureless face towards me, and though it didn't speak, I felt its message as clearly as if it had shouted, "This is the only way." "There has to be another option," I pleaded, even as I felt the certainty of its silent command settling over me like a heavy cloak. The room began to reset again, but this time the shadowy figure remained. It continued to point at the closet, unwavering and insistent. I watched my past self wake up, saw the fear and confusion play out across her, my face. But this time, instead of helplessly observing, I made a decision. As my past self approached the closet, I stepped forward, aligning myself with her. I couldn't touch anything in this realm, but maybe, just maybe, I could influence myself. "Open it," I whispered, willing my past self to hear me. "You have to go through." To my amazement, my past self hesitated, her hand on the doorknob. She looked around, confused, as if she'd heard something. "Yes," I encouraged. "Listen to me. Open the door and step inside. It's the only way out." Slowly, uncertainly, my past self turned the knob and pulled the door open. The closet beyond was a void of absolute darkness, somehow darker than the blackest night. My past self balked, starting to pull back. But I pressed on, my voice urgent. You have to go in. Trust me. Trust yourself. For a moment I thought she would refuse, that we'd be doomed to repeat this loop endlessly. But then, with a deep breath, my past self squared her shoulders and stepped into the darkness. As she crossed the threshold, I felt a tugging sensation, as if some invisible force was pulling me along. I glanced back at the shadowy figure, still pointing silently at the closet. I hope you know what you're doing, I muttered. Then, with no other choice left, I followed my past self into the void. The moment I entered the closet, the world around me dissolved. I was falling, tumbling through an endless darkness. I couldn't tell up from down, couldn't see or hear anything beyond the rush of my own panicked breathing. And then, suddenly, I wasn't falling anymore. I was standing, my feet on solid ground, in a place that was both familiar and utterly alien. It looked like my bedroom, but twisted and wrong. The walls were covered in writhing shadows. The furniture warped and melted as if in some surrealist painting. And there, in the center of the room, stood my doppelganger, its eyes gleaming with malicious glee. "Welcome home, Emily," it said, its voice an eerie echo of my own. "Are you ready to face yourself?" As the words hung in the air, I realized that the shadowy figure had been right. This was the only way forward. To break the loop, to escape this nightmare, I would have to confront the darkest parts of myself. With a deep breath, I stepped towards my doppelganger, ready to face whatever twisted version of reality awaited me. The time for running was over. Now it was time to stand and fight. As I stepped into the closet, the world around me shifted and warped. The familiar confines of my bedroom melted away, replaced by a distorted version of a place I hadn't seen in years, my childhood home. The walls were covered in peeling wallpaper, the patterns twisting and writhing as if alive. The floor creaked beneath my feet, each step sending shivers up my spine. Family photos lined the hallway, but the faces in them were grotesquely distorted, their eyes following me as I moved. "Hello?" I called out, my voice echoing unnaturally in the twisted space. "Is anyone here?" In response, I heard that familiar, chilling laughter. It seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once, but there was a distinct pull towards the upper floors of the house. With no other choice, I began to climb the stairs. Each step groaned in protest, and I couldn't shake the feeling that the staircase might collapse at any moment. As I ascended, the laughter grew louder, more maniacal. When I reached the second-floor landing, I noticed a string dangling from the ceiling, the pull for the attic stairs. The laughter was definitely coming from up there now. "Okay," I muttered to myself, steeling my nerves. "You can do this, Emily." I reached up and pulled the string. The attic stairs unfolded with a screech that set my teeth on edge. The laughter abruptly stopped, replaced by an expectant silence that was somehow even more unnerving. Taking a deep breath, I climbed the attic stairs. The space above was pitch black, and for a moment I considered turning back. But then, a faint light flickered to life, revealing the cluttered expanse of the attic. Dust motes danced in the pale light, and the air was thick with the musty smell of forgotten memories. Boxes and old furniture were piled haphazardly, creating a maze of shadowy corridors. And there, in the center of it all, sat a decrepit jack-in-the-box. It was larger than any toy box I'd ever seen, about the size of a small trunk. The once bright paint was chipped and faded, and rust crept along its metal edges. A large crank protruded from one side, begging to be turned. As I approached, I could hear a faint melody playing, a slow, creepy version of Pop Goes the Weasel. My heart pounded in my chest as I drew closer, every instinct screaming at me to run, but I knew I couldn't. Whatever answers I was looking for, they were here, in this twisted version of my past. I reached out, my hand trembling, and grasped the crank. It was ice cold to the touch. Slowly I began to turn it. The melody grew louder with each rotation, the tempo increasing. I could feel the tension building, knew what was coming, but I couldn't stop. Suddenly, with a loud sproing, the lid of the box flew open. I stumbled back, a scream caught in my throat. There, emerging from the box, was a puppet. But this was no ordinary marionette. It was a grotesque caricature of me. The puppet had my face, or at least a twisted version of it. The eyes were too large, the smile too wide, filled with sharp, needle-like teeth. Its body was a patchwork of mismatched fabrics, stitched together with crude, uneven seams. "Hello, Emily," the puppet said, its voice a nightmarish parody of my own. "We've been waiting for you." I backed away, my back hitting a stack of boxes. What are you?" The puppet's head tilted to an unnatural angle, its grin widening impossibly further. "I'm you, of course. The you that you've been trying so hard to forget." "No," I shook my head vehemently. "You're not me. You can't be." "Oh, but I am," the puppet cackled. "I'm every dark thought you've ever had, every cruel impulse you've suppressed. I'm the truth you've been running from all these years." I felt my knees go weak, and I sank to the floor. "What do you want from me?" The puppet's eyes gleamed in the dim light. "It's not about what I want, Emily, it's about what you need. You need to face the truth. About yourself, about your past, about everything." "What truth?" I demanded, anger beginning to override my fear. "Stop speaking in riddles." "Very well." The puppet sighed, its fabric shoulders sagging dramatically. "Let me spell it out for you. This nightmare you've been experiencing, it's not some random occurrence. It's a manifestation of your guilt, your fear, your unresolved trauma." I felt a chill run down my spine. "What are you talking about?" "Think, Emily," the puppet urged. "Think back to that night 10 years ago. The night everything changed." Suddenly, memories I'd long suppressed came flooding back. The argument with my parents, the car ride in the rain, the screeching of tires. "No," I whispered, tears welling in my eyes. "Please, no." "Yes." The puppet nodded, its voice uncharacteristically gentle. "The accident wasn't your fault, Emily, but the guilt you've carried, the pain you've buried, that's what's created this nightmare. That's what's kept you trapped." I buried my face in my hands, sobs racking my body. I just wanted them to stop fighting. I just wanted us to be a family again. "I know," the puppet said. "But running from the past won't change it. You need to confront it, accept it, and let it go." I looked up, wiping tears from my eyes. "How? How do I do that?" The puppet's expression turned serious, all trace of its earlier malice gone. "You have a choice to make, Emily. A choice that will determine not just your fate, but the fate of everyone you love." "What choice?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. The puppet gestured, and suddenly, 2 doors appeared in the attic. One was bright and inviting, sunlight streaming from beneath it. The other was dark and foreboding, seeming to absorb the light around it. "Behind the bright door lies forgetting," the puppet explained. "You'll wake up in your bed with no memory of this nightmare or the trauma that caused it. You'll be free from the pain, but you'll also lose a part of yourself." I turned to the dark door. "And behind that one?" "Remembering," the puppet said solemnly. "You'll have to face every painful memory, every dark thought, every fear you've ever had. It will be agonizing, but on the other side lies true healing and growth." I stood up slowly, looking between the 2 doors. "And this choice affects everyone I love?" "How?" The puppet's eyes seemed to bore into me. "Because your choice doesn't just shape your future, Emily. It shapes theirs too. Forgetting might seem easier, but it means you'll never truly connect with them. You'll always be holding back, afraid of a pain you can't remember. But remembering, it's harder, but it allows you to love fully, to be present in a way you haven't been in years. I took a deep breath, considering my options. The bright door was tempting. The promise of freedom from this pain was almost overwhelming. But as I looked at it, I realized it wasn't real sunlight streaming from beneath, but a harsh, artificial glow. The dark door, as frightening as it was, seemed more honest. I could feel the pain radiating from it, but also a sense of truth, of reality. I think I know what I have to do, I said, my voice shaking. The puppet nodded. Remember, Emily, whatever you choose, it must be of your own free will. This is your journey, your healing. With one last look at the bright door, I turned and walked towards the dark one. My hand trembled as I reached for the knob. Are you sure? The puppet asked, its voice soft. I nodded, swallowing hard. I'm sure. I'm done running. As my hand closed around the knob, I heard the puppet speak one last time. Good luck, Emily. And remember, the darkest hour is just before dawn. With that, I turned the knob and stepped through the door, ready to face whatever lay on the other side. As darkness enveloped me, I knew that the real confrontation, with my past, my fears, and myself, was only just beginning. As I stepped through the dark door, a torrent of memories crashed over me like a tidal wave. I gasped, overwhelmed by the sudden flood of images, sounds, and emotions that I had long buried deep within my psyche. I saw myself, younger and more carefree, sneaking into my parents' study late one night. The room was dimly lit, filled with ancient books and strange artifacts my archaeologist parents had collected over the years. My eyes were drawn to an ornate wooden box sitting on my father's desk. Don't touch that, Emily, I whispered to my younger self, knowing it was futile. Please don't open it. But of course she did. With trembling hands, my younger self lifted the lid of the box. A cloud of dark smoke billowed out, coalescing into a shadowy figure that loomed over her. I watched in horror as the entity's eyes glowed red, and it let out a bone-chilling laugh before dissipating into the air. The memory faded, and I found myself back in the twisted version of my childhood home. Oh God, I muttered, realization dawning. It was me. I unleashed this thing. Guilt and fear propelled me into action. I raced through the house, searching desperately for some way to undo my mistake. The walls seemed to shift and change around me, doors appearing and disappearing at random. As I ran, I noticed something disturbing. The walls were beginning to ooze a thick black substance. It dripped down in rivulets, pooling on the floor and forming words. Your fault, one puddle spelled out. Can't escape, another taunted. I shook my head, trying to clear it. No, I said firmly. I won't let you manipulate me. I'm going to fix this. The house seemed to groan in response, the floorboards creaking ominously beneath my feet. I pushed on, checking room after room, growing increasingly frantic. There has to be a way, I muttered, throwing open yet another door. Come on, Emily, think. Suddenly, I remembered something my father once told me about his work. Every curse has a counter, his voice echoed in my mind. Every lock, a key. The box, I realized. I need to find that box. With renewed determination, I made my way towards where I remembered my father's study to be. But as I approached, the hallway stretched impossibly long, the door to the study receding farther and farther away. No, I shouted, breaking into a run. You can't keep me out. The black ooze continued to form words around me as I ran. Give up, it spelled out. Too late, another warned. But I ignored them, focused solely on reaching that door. Just as it seemed I would never make it, my hand closed around the doorknob. With a triumphant cry, I wrenched it open. But instead of my father's study, I found myself staring down a flight of stairs leading to the basement. A basement our house had never had. What is this? I wondered aloud, peering into the darkness below. The stairs creaked as I descended, the air growing colder with each step. When I reached the bottom, I found myself in a vast cavernous space that couldn't possibly fit beneath our house. And there, at the far end of the room, stood a door. It was unlike any door I'd ever seen, circular, with strange symbols etched into its surface. It pulsed with an eerie, otherworldly light. As I approached, I could hear whispers emanating from behind it. Thousands of voices, some familiar, some not, all speaking at once in a cacophony of sound. "Hello?" I called out, my voice echoing in the vast space. "Is someone there?" The whispers grew louder in response, and I could almost make out words. "Emily, help us, trapped. Your fault." I reached out to touch the door, and as my fingers brushed its surface, a jolt of energy surged through me. Suddenly, I could see beyond the door, a swirling vortex of memories, both mine and not mine. I saw flashes of my life. Birthdays, holidays, ordinary days made extraordinary by the love of my family. But interspersed with these were darker images. Wars, plagues, disasters, both natural and man-made. "What is this?" I asked, my voice trembling. "It's everything," a familiar voice responded. I turned to see the puppet from the attic, now human-sized and standing beside me. Every memory, every moment, every possibility, all contained within this vortex. "But why?" I asked, unable to tear my eyes away from the swirling mass of images. "Because you opened Pandora's box, Emily," the puppet explained. "Not just literally, but figuratively. You unleashed not just that entity, but the potential for all the darkness in the world." I shook my head, overwhelmed. "That's not possible. I was just a kid. How could I have done all this?" "The box was a nexus point," the puppet said. "A convergence of possibilities. By opening it, you set in motion a chain of events that rippled out across time and space." "So how do I stop it?" I asked, desperation creeping into my voice. The puppet's expression turned grave. "You have to go in there," it said, pointing to the vortex. "You have to face every memory, every possibility, and make peace with them all." I stared at the swirling mass of images, fear gripping my heart. What if I get lost in there? "You might," the puppet admitted, "but it's the only way to set things right." I took a deep breath, steeling myself. "Okay," I said. "I'll do it." As I stepped towards the vortex, the puppet spoke once more. "Remember, Emily, the truth will set you free. But first, it will hurt like hell." With one last look back at the twisted version of my home, I stepped into the vortex. The world around me exploded into a kaleidoscope of memories and possibilities. I saw myself growing up, making different choices, living different lives. I saw wars averted and disasters prevented, but also moments of joy and love lost. Each image, each possibility, felt as real and vivid as my own memories. As I tumbled through this sea of what-ifs and might-have-beens, I realized that this was my true challenge. Not just facing my own past, but accepting all the paths not taken, all the lives I might have lived. "I'm ready," I whispered to the swirling chaos around me. "Show me everything. I'm not running anymore." And with that, I surrendered myself fully to the vortex, ready to confront every possibility, every fear, every hope. Whatever lay ahead, I knew that this was the only way to truly set things right, not just for myself, but for everyone whose lives had been touched by my fateful decision so many years ago. As the vortex enveloped me completely, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. Whatever happened next, I knew I was finally on the path to true understanding and, hopefully, redemption. As I plunged into the swirling vortex, the world around me exploded into a cacophony of light, sound, and sensation. Time and space stretched and warped, reality bending in ways my mind struggled to comprehend. I was everywhere and nowhere, experiencing 1,000 lifetimes in the blink of an eye. "Focus, Emily," I muttered to myself, fighting against the current that threatened to sweep me away. "You have to stay in control." But control was a fleeting concept in this maelstrom of possibilities. As I pushed forward, I felt hands grabbing at me, trying to hold me back. I turned to see faces, my faces, staring back at me with a mix of fear, anger, and desperation. One version of myself, older and careworn, reached out with trembling hands. "Please," she begged, "don't change things. I've finally found peace." Another, younger and full of fire, snarled, "You can't undo what's been done." "The world needs the darkness," I shook my head, pushing past them. "I'm sorry," I said, "but this isn't right. None of this is how it's supposed to be." As I fought my way through the crowd of alternate selves, the vortex grew more intense. Memories and possibilities whipped past me at dizzying speeds. I saw flashes of lives I might have lived: a celebrated artist, a hardened soldier, a grieving mother, a world leader. Each one pulled at me, tempting me with its own version of reality. "Stay focused," I reminded myself, gritting my teeth against the onslaught. "You're here for a reason." Finally, after what felt like an eternity of struggling, I broke through to the center of the maelstrom. Here, in the eye of the storm, there was an eerie calm, and waiting for me, wearing that same chilling smile, was the puppet. But it wasn't quite the puppet anymore. It had grown, shifted, become more real. It looked like me, but not me. A twisted, shadowy version of myself that made my skin crawl. "Welcome, Emily," it said, its voice echoing strangely in the void. "I've been expecting you." I squared my shoulders, trying to project a confidence I didn't entirely feel. "I'm here to set things right," I declared, "to undo the damage I've done." The puppet me laughed, the sound reverberating through the vortex. "Oh, Emily, still so naive. Do you really think you can change things now, after all this time?" "I have to try," I insisted. "I won't let fear control me anymore." "Fear?" The puppet's eyes glinted dangerously. "You haven't even begun to understand true fear." With those words, the battle began. It wasn't a physical fight, not exactly. Instead, it was a clash of wills, each thought and emotion manifesting in the reality around us. I focused on memories of love and hope. My parents' smiles, the warmth of a friend's hug, the satisfaction of overcoming a challenge. The vortex responded, filling with soft light and gentle breezes. But the puppet countered with darker visions: war, famine, natural disasters. The light dimmed, replaced by swirling storm clouds and flashes of lightning. "This is the truth of the world," the puppet hissed. "Chaos and darkness. You opened the door to it, Emily. You can't close it now." I staggered under the weight of the images, feeling the crush of guilt and despair. "No," I gasped. "There's more to life than this. There has to be." I conjured images of small kindnesses: a stranger helping someone up after a fall, a child sharing their toy, a community coming together after a tragedy. The storm in the vortex calmed slightly, hints of blue sky peeking through the clouds. The puppet snarled, lashing out with tendrils of shadow. "Foolish girl. These small moments mean nothing in the face of the world's cruelty." It bombarded me with scenes of betrayal, of loved ones turning against each other, of the darkest aspects of human nature. I fell to my knees, overwhelmed by the onslaught. "Give in, Emily," the puppet crooned, its voice almost gentle now. "Accept the darkness, embrace it, it's easier that way." For a moment I was tempted. The weight of responsibility, of trying to fix my mistake, felt crushing. Wouldn't it be easier to just let go, to allow the darkness to win? But then, cutting through the chaos of the vortex, I heard a voice. A familiar voice, one I hadn't heard in years. "Emily, sweetheart, don't give up." "Mom?" I whispered, looking around frantically. "Mom, where are you?" The puppet's eyes widened in surprise, then narrowed in anger. "No," it growled. "This isn't possible." But the voice came again, stronger this time. "We believe in you, Emily. You're stronger than you know." And then another voice joined in, my father's. Remember who you are, kiddo. Remember what we taught you. Tears streamed down my face as I listened to their words. I thought I'd lost you, I choked out. You never lost us, my mother's voice assured me. We've always been with you in here. I felt a warmth in my chest as if she was pointing to my heart. But the accident, I said, confusion mixing with hope. I thought, the accident was just that, an accident, my father's voice explained. It wasn't your fault, Emily, and it didn't define us, or you. As they spoke, I felt a surge of strength flowing through me. The vortex responded, the darkness receding as light began to fill the space. The puppet stumbled back, its form flickering. No, it shouted. You can't do this. The darkness is too strong. But I stood tall, bolstered by the love and support I felt. The darkness is only as strong as we allow it to be, I said, my voice ringing with newfound conviction. And I'm not allowing it anymore. I focused all my energy, all my will, on pushing back against the puppet and the darkness it represented. The vortex spun faster, reality shifting and reforming around us. You're a part of me, I told the puppet, my voice firm but not unkind. The part that's afraid, that wants to hide from the world. But you don't control me anymore. The puppet's form wavered, becoming less solid. You need me, it insisted, but its voice lacked its former confidence. Without the darkness, how will you appreciate the light? I nodded, understanding flooding through me. You're right. We need both. But in balance, not in conflict. I held out my hand to the puppet. It's time to stop fighting, time to heal. For a moment, the puppet hesitated, fear and uncertainty clear in its eyes. Then, slowly, it reached out and took my hand. As our fingers touched, I felt a jolt of energy surge through me. The puppet's form dissipated, merging with me, and I gasped as a lifetime of suppressed emotions and memories flooded my consciousness. The vortex around us began to stabilize, the wild swings between light and dark settling into a gentle, swirling mix of both. I could still see alternate timelines, other possibilities, but they no longer felt threatening. Instead, they were simply roads not taken, parts of a greater whole. As the chaos subsided, I heard my parents' voices one last time. We're so proud of you, Emily, my mother said, her voice full of love. You've faced your fears, my father added. Now it's time to live. I nodded, tears of joy and relief streaming down my face. I love you both, I whispered. Thank you for everything. As their presence faded, I felt a shift in the vortex. The swirling energies began to coalesce, forming a path before me. I knew without being told that this was my way back to my world, my time, my reality. But as I prepared to step onto the path, I realized that I was no longer the same person who had entered this vortex. I had faced my deepest fears, confronted the darkness within myself, and come out stronger for it. Whatever waited for me on the other side of this journey, I knew I was ready to face it. My eyes snapped open, heart pounding in my chest. The familiar surroundings of my bedroom came into focus, bathed in the soft glow of early morning light. For a moment, I lay perfectly still, trying to sort reality from the vivid images still swirling in my mind. Was it all just a dream? I whispered to the empty room, my voice hoarse as if I'd been screaming. Slowly, I sat up, sheets clinging to my sweat-soaked skin. The room looked normal. My dresser, the cluttered desk, posters on the walls. Everything was exactly where it should be. And yet, something felt off. My gaze was drawn inexorably to the closet. The door was slightly ajar, a sliver of darkness visible in the gap. My breath caught in my throat as memories of the nightmare flooded back. The laughter, the puppet, the vortex of realities. It wasn't real, I told myself firmly, even as a shiver ran down my spine. It couldn't have been real. But the slightly open closet door seemed to mock my attempts at rationality. With trembling legs, I stood and approached it, each step feeling like it took an eternity. My hand hovered over the doorknob, hesitating. Part of me wanted to slam it shut, to turn away and pretend everything was normal. But a deeper part, the part that had faced down my fears in that swirling vortex of possibilities, urged me forward. "Come on, Emily," I muttered. "You've faced worse than a closet door." Taking a deep breath, I pulled the door open. No laughter erupted, no puppet sprang out. It was just my closet filled with clothes and boxes of old belongings. I let out a shaky laugh, relief washing over me. "See? Nothing to worry about," I said, turning to close the door. But as I did, something caught my eye. A corner of paper sticking out from beneath a stack of old notebooks. Frowning, I knelt down and gently tugged it free. It was a photograph, old and slightly faded. My breath caught as I stared at the image. It showed a young woman, perhaps in her early 20s, standing in front of an old house. She was smiling, her eyes bright with excitement. The face was hauntingly familiar, and yet I was certain I'd never seen this woman before. She looked a bit like my mother, but younger than in any photos I had of her. And there was something else, something in the set of her jaw, the gleam in her eye that reminded me of myself. "Who are you?" I whispered, tracing the outline of the woman's face with my finger. As if in response, I heard something. A faint sound, barely audible, coming from somewhere else in the house. I froze, straining my ears. There it was again, a whisper of laughter, so quiet I might have imagined it. My heart began to race once more. "Hello," I called out, my voice embarrassingly shaky. "Is someone there?" No response came, just the oppressive silence of the house. I stood slowly, the photograph still clutched in my hand. Part of me wanted to crawl back into bed, to pull the covers over my head and pretend none of this was happening. But I knew I couldn't. Whatever was going on, I had to face it. With slow, cautious steps, I made my way to the bedroom door. My hand trembled as I reached for the doorknob. Just as I was about to turn it, movement in my peripheral vision made me freeze. Slowly, I turned my head towards the source, my dresser mirror. For a moment, everything seemed normal. I saw myself, pale and wide-eyed, the photograph still in my hand. But then, did my reflection smile? Just for a second, a fraction of a second, did I see my own lips curl up in a smirk that I wasn't making? I blinked hard, shaking my head. When I looked again, the mirror showed only my terrified expression. "Get a grip," I told myself sternly. "You're freaking yourself out over nothing." But as I turned away from the mirror, I couldn't shake the feeling that eyes were watching me, following my every move. With a deep breath, I opened the bedroom door and stepped out into the hallway. The house was quiet, the kind of deep silence that seems to press against your eardrums. Each creak of the floorboards under my feet sounded impossibly loud. "Hello?" I called out again, my voice echoing slightly in the empty space. "Mom? Dad? Is anyone home?" No answer came. I made my way down the stairs, one hand trailing along the wall for support. The living room was empty, sunlight streaming through the windows and painting patterns on the floor. Everything looked normal, and yet there was a tension in the air as if the whole house was holding its breath. I wandered into the kitchen, half expecting, I don't know what, but it was just our kitchen, same as always. Dirty dishes in the sink, a half-empty coffee pot on the counter, a note stuck to the fridge with a magnet. I approached the fridge, squinting to read the note. It was my mother's handwriting. "Emily, gone to the store. Back soon. Love, Mom." I frowned, trying to remember if she had mentioned going out. But my memories of the previous day were hazy, overshadowed by the vivid images from my dream. If it was a dream. The photograph was still in my hand. I looked down at it again, studying the familiar yet strange face of the young woman. "Who are you?" I murmured. "And why do I feel like I should know you?" As if in answer, I heard it again. That faint whisper of laughter. This time, It seemed to be coming from the basement door. I turned slowly, staring at the closed door with a mixture of fear and curiosity. We didn't use the basement much. It was mostly storage, boxes of old holiday decorations and forgotten belongings. But now, it felt like it was calling to me. Like whatever answers I was looking for were waiting just beyond that door. "This is crazy," I said aloud, even as I took a step towards the basement door. "It's just the basement. There's nothing down there." But another part of me, the part that remembered the vortex and the battle with my dark self, wasn't so sure. That part knew that reality wasn't always what it seemed, that impossible things could happen. My hand reached out almost of its own accord and grasped the doorknob. It felt ice cold beneath my fingers. For a moment I stood frozen, every instinct screaming at me to turn around, to run back to my room and hide under the covers. But I couldn't. Whatever was happening, whatever that dream or vision or experience had been, I knew I had to see it through. I had faced my fears once before in that swirling chaos of possibilities. I could do it again. With a deep breath, I turned the knob and pulled the basement door open. Cool, musty air wafted up from the darkness below. The stairs stretched down into shadows, the single bulb at the bottom providing barely enough light to see by. I took a tentative step onto the first stair, then another. The wood creaked beneath my weight, the sound impossibly loud in the silence of the house. As I descended, the darkness seemed to press in around me, alive and watching. When I reached the bottom, I fumbled for the light switch. The bulb flickered to life, casting long shadows across the cluttered space. Boxes were stacked haphazardly, old furniture draped with sheets, cobwebs decorating the corners. And there, in the center of the room, stood something that hadn't been there before. A full-length mirror, its ornate frame covered in dust. I approached it slowly, drawn by some force I couldn't explain. As I stood before the mirror, I saw myself, pale, frightened, the photograph still clutched in my hand. But there was something else, something in my eyes that I didn't recognize, a knowledge, a power, that hadn't been there before. I raised my free hand, watching as my reflection did the same. Our fingertips touched the cool surface of the glass, and in that moment I felt a surge of something. Energy, memory, possibility, I couldn't quite name it. Ability. The basement around me began to blur and shift. The photograph in my hand grew warm. And as reality itself seemed to waver, I heard that laughter again. But this time, I recognized it as my own. Whatever was happening, whatever journey I had started, I realized it was far from over.